Welcome to Optimal. See, this is the kind of thing that turns out I normally take like 30 or 40 takes to get the show started without laughing. So, this is that was take one. Get down, get ready for the long haul. Oh boy, Scott's here. No. Welcome to Optimal Play. I'm Brandon.
I'm Steven.
And we are here live as part of FarkhamCon 2020. What we're doing today is recording our deep dive discussion of the Forgotten Age campaign, which, like the Carcosa campaign, we were planning to do right around the time that the return box was going to come out. It's going to have a very spoilerific and detailed discussion of our thoughts on the campaign, and also kind of our predictions / hopes for what is going to be in the return box. And since we're live, we'll be checking in with the chat every so often. So we'd love to hear what you expect, what you hope, what your hopes are for the return box, and what you think of our thoughts about the campaign. I am really nervous about getting real-time feedback here.
It's fine. It'll be great. No one ever disagrees with us.
No, never. And we're always in perfect sync too.
Yeah,
I made a pretty elaborate set of like notes, kind of refreshing myself on the campaign and stuff. And I showed them to Steven, and Steven was like, all right, let me edit this. And I said, no. So we will find out together what we do and don't agree on, which should be exciting. Steven, should we shout out to your employer? You mentioned that you had to explain to your boss what FarkhamCon was so that you could join us on this Thursday afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah. So I work for Omaze, which we do like celebrity sweepstakes. We actually did like D&D and Magic ones recently. But my first half review was during this panel. So I had to tell my boss, like, hey, there's this thing called FarkhamCon, and that's why I can't get my first half review right now. So it got moved to next week. So
I'm very pleased that your priorities are in the right place. So hopefully this doesn't ding you on that review when it happens. But it's happening in the second half of the year, so it should just be on the next review.
Exactly.
FarkhamCon, if you've stumbled onto our stream because you follow Optimal Play or hit a random button on Twitch, FarkhamCon is the online Arkham Horror the card game convention running today through Sunday and organized by the amazing hosts of the Mythos Busters podcast and some of their behind the scenes friends as well. So shout out to Ian, Scott, Justin, Nick, and Sean. Wow, I did it. Thank you for organizing FarkhamCon. This is the first of several times we'll be streaming. So we're really excited to be here. If you've not checked it out, you can go to FarkhamCon.com for the whole schedule to get a digital badge and follow and play along.
Does that actually work?
FarkhamCon.com?
Oh, yeah, it forwards.
Yeah, it forwards to the Hey Summit site that they're using. Yeah. And then, oh no, I said I lost it. I had put it on my clipboard to put in chat. But what we're doing for FarkhamCon tomorrow, as I stall a little bit and look for the link, is what we're calling the Ultimatum of Crowdsourced Chaos. Here we go. I found it. There's a link in the chat. So we are playing Murder at the Excelsior Hotel. You may have heard of the Ultimatum of Chaos, where you play with 30 random cards. Our twist on that is we're asking 30 of you to each submit a card to each deck. So each of you gets to do 1/30th of our deck building, and then we are going to shuffle up and see what happens. It's going to be Steven and myself and Kyle and Ian, two of our friends that I've been streaming Arkham with a lot during quarantine. So
I've heard that the Safina does not have 5 events yet, so we'll see. Is she going to get up to 5?
Yeah, the rest of the team, I'm seeing the submissions as they come in. The rest of the team is not, so I have a little bit of, I've been teasing them a little bit about how it's going. And yeah, Safina could definitely use some more events, so please give her some events. She's not at 5 yet. So yeah, that link, we were at like 18-ish submissions last I checked, so we need a good handful more, but it'll just be first come, first serve. So please, you put in the summon down for Safina. Yeah, I'm sure that will be great. Sure, it won't turn on us and ruin everything. So this is your opportunity to, we ask on there that you donate to a social justice cause, because that's really important to us this summer and always, but it's been a big deal this summer. And then ruin our day tomorrow. And we'll be streaming that at 2:30 Pacific time on this Twitch channel via Tabletop Simulator. So should be a really good time. Gen Con is on. Did you see any of the Fantasy Flights? First of all, did you attempt to watch the Fantasy Flight in-flight live last night?
No, I did not. What happened?
Oh, that was a disaster. It started at about the 10-minute mark. It started cutting out. And after 3 or 4 times that it crashed, they just called it off and recorded it and put it on YouTube later in the night. It gave me serious fears about this stream going wrong. It was, yeah. Thoth in the chat is right. They did at least, like, I was pleasantly surprised. It was like an hour and a half later that they got it up on YouTube. It was real quick.
Some of these conventions aren't even trying to be live. Like, I remember I tried to watch a Eric Lang board game design panel for Comic-Con, and it was just that at the time of the panel, they just posted the video on YouTube, but it was clearly already recorded. Like, it wasn't live at all.
When it's like Nintendo Direct and like all the like video game companies have all kind of nailed the pre-recorded presentation that then is streamed on Twitch, so it feels like you're there for it. I have no idea why Fantasy Flight didn't just do that, but yeah, there were some. There were actually more Arkham teases than I expected. There was a little bit of a dive into what's coming in the Innsmouth campaign. We get to drive vehicles, so yeah. I don't know if you'd seen that.
No.
So yeah, slight preview style or spoiler on that. I'm excited because I don't get to drive a car in real life because there's nowhere to go right now. So at least I can.
Yeah, like if you could take a vacation to Innsmouth and there was no coronavirus there, but like maybe some other stuff, like would you right now?
If there was escape the coronavirus but face the fish people cultists, it's tempting. I gotta say, it's a toss up.
Yeah, you have to check the Airbnb prices.
Yeah, right. Which I've heard those are pretty decent right now. So. There's a new Elder Sign expansion called Marvel X-Men Heroes Resurrect. Oh shoot, I forgot the name of it.
Wait, that's related to Elder Sign?
It's a reskin of Elder Sign. If you look at the trailer, it's like you're using dice to complete series of icons in the order they're printed on the card, or else punishments happen. It is. I like Elder Sign, so that seems maybe okay, but it's it is what it is.
I'm excited about, there's a Twilight Imperium expansion. So, if you ever thought it was too short with 6 people, you can now play like a 15-hour 8-person version.
So. Right. Yeah. I have never had the privilege of playing Twilight Imperium. I know you play it kind of on the regular, right?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite games, even though it's been like a year since I played it. But it's really fun, and I will play the expansion, but probably not with 8 people.
Oh man. You just gotta schedule like a 3-day weekend for it.
I remember I was dating my girlfriend, and we'd only been dating about a month, and I was like, hey, like we can hang out tonight, but I'm not really sure when, like probably like 8 to 10 p.m.-ish. Like
I thought you were
very confused.
I thought you were gonna say you invited her to play TI4.
I'm not that dumb.
Even I don't know if you're referring to someone who was also a gamer, but even if you were, I don't think I would recommend that 1 month into the relationship you play TI4 together.
Definitely not. I might like betray her star bases, and then the relationship is just dead.
Yeah. Pretty much. I think I've learned that the key to a healthy relationship is not playing games where you are tempted to backstab each other. It tends to bleed out of the game a little bit. And chat is reminding us that I don't know. Have you played much Descent? There was the tiniest little tease. If you missed it, it would be understandable. At the end of the video, like literally the last 15 seconds of the video, they show the box for Descent presumably 3rd edition, unless they're calling it 4th edition because Imperial Assault was 3rd edition.
I have no interest in Descent or like any game set in that like weird fantasy setting that was Christian T. Peterson's other love child. For some reason, Twilight Imperium I find charming, but his fantasy one I'm like, oh, that's silly.
It's generic, but it is sometimes full of funny writing, and it's inoffensive. I don't know. I like it. Terranoth is the name of the universe and the name of the IP. I like Descent though. The 1 versus mini dungeon crawler. I'm excited for what 3rd edition has in store. But since they were, announcing pretty much everything that was coming out in the next like 6 to 8 months in the stream, it sounds like this one's further off than that. So that's kind of disappointing. But lots of Arkham to keep us busy between now and then.
I mean, it might not be Fantasy Flight that's the limiting factor on when we get to play these games. So
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, actually, who knows if we'll survive to see Descent the way the world is going.
All right, so someone agrees with me that Space Fantasy is better than Earth Fantasy. So Archer Av, I totally agree.
Why is it? Like less gravity? Is it gravity that you find uninteresting?
It's not really that original because it's kind of a ripoff of Dune, but it still feels a little more original than Terranoth.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I actually don't know anything about the Twilight Imperium universe, so I'm just sitting here smiling and nodding for the most part. All right, Forgotten Age, ready?
Yep.
I have a 4-monitor display in front of me as I have like notes on one, Twitch chat on one, card overlays on another one because we're doing our best to produce this live, including showing cards on the screen. So I'm ready to get into it. Steven, how do you like the Forgotten Age?
I actually like it a lot. Not as much as Carcosa. I think it's one of the only ones where it like wasn't arguably better than the campaign before. I think like pretty much every other campaign, you can make the argument that it's better than the one before. This one, I probably wouldn't say it's better than Carcosa, but yeah. I like a lot of it.
I mean, I'm indecisive about what's my favorite campaign. It might still be Carcosa, even though parts of it feel kind of like not that modern anymore. So I might argue that that's true of every campaign since Carcosa, that it's not as good as Carcosa.
For me, it's probably between Dream Eaters and Circle Undone.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think for me, it'd be Circle Undone and Carcosa. Dream Eaters, I've only played once so far, but I don't know.
So one thing I noticed is that every other campaign, they alternate between kind of like a more pulpy and a more like cerebral style. Mm-hmm. So maybe you like the cerebral ones because like Carcosa and Circle Undone are definitely the most like cerebral and dark and like psychological and like, are you going crazy or is it like your fate to be doomed? And then like Dunwich and Forgotten Age and Dream Eaters are much more pulpy and adventurous. And like, even when they're dark, it's like not like really that it's very like surface level dark. It's not like psychological, like it is your fate to be damned or it's kind of dark.
I think you're right. I think I like that flavor a little better, although I like the story and the scene of Forgotten Age being set in like the Mexican jungle kind of sets it apart from not only dramatically a different tone from the rest of Arkham, but really I haven't played a lot of like tabletop games in like kind of an Aztec Mayan inspired setting. So I think that's pretty cool. But
I think they really varied up the style of pulp. So like the Core and Dunwich are very traditional Arkham pulp, but then like Forgotten Age is probably the most original, but Dream Eaters also was like a little bit funky too. So definitely varying a lot more, but still kind of on the pulpy adventure side.
Well, I think to me more than anything, it's just that it's such a punch in the gut. You're right. Actually, I'm going to try to respond to the chat only like between scenarios rather than letting you derail me all the time. But yes, I do need to play Tzolk'in. I've never played it. That is another great game in a Aztec Mayan inspired setting. Aztec, I think, specifically in that game. But anyway, I think it's just that the Forgotten Age is a punch in the gut and then another punch in the gut and kind of never stops punching. And it just, we're about to get into it, but there are very, very few moments that are kind of breathers or moments where I feel like I can just kind of enjoy what's going on. At the same time, it has several of my favorite scenarios in the game. Like if I were to list my top 10 scenarios, probably 3 of them at least are in this campaign. So it's got high highs.
Yeah, I would actually describe it not so much as purely a punch in the gut, but is like very snowbally because I've actually replayed it when I like knew this campaign a bit better. And like, if you do well in the first couple scenarios, like the difficulty is more like a normal Arkham campaign, but typically on your blind playthrough, you're not going to pick the best supplies. You might fail on some of the early scenarios and it kind of snowballs a bit where it's like, oh, I have all this extra trauma, so I'm dying more. So I did find like my blind playthrough very difficult, but like if you actually do well in the first couple scenarios, it's a lot more similar to the other campaigns.
Okay, I could see that. Maybe I've just never done well in the first couple scenarios. All right, well, let's get into it. The campaign starts with the Untamed Wilds, where I think it's the first time that we didn't like start in Arkham, right? The setup is quick. It's expedition journal entries, and you're off to the jungle, looking for the mythical, the like theorized Estley ruins.
Yeah.
But first you buy supplies. What do you think of supplies?
So supplies are very divisive. I know some people who are like, I want to like know what all the best supplies are before I even play it once. And then there's other people who are like, oh, that's really funny that like, you know, because I didn't have a blanket or whatever, I got cold and I got a trauma. I'm a little more in the latter group. Like I don't really, I kind of enjoy just picking randomly and seeing what happens. The only difference is like, I wouldn't want there to be any like really important story content that I missed out on.
Sure.
But I don't think that
there isn't really. Yeah.
So I'm actually
maybe like lighting the braziers near the very end, if you have torches, is the closest it comes to that.
So yeah, I'm actually okay with the supplies. I think they're pretty fun.
The thing is, it feels like a cool menu of like, oh, I'm probably going to get to do cool stuff with all these things, but it's much more common that you just get punished for the ones you don't have. And I think that's why I find them fairly unenjoyable. Like, I don't know. And then the player scaling is like an issue too, right? The more players you have, the more provisions and gasoline you'll need, but you don't really get that many more points as a team.
Yeah, the scaling's a bit weird. I mean, there's a lot of mechanics in this game and maybe a little bit more in this campaign that have issues with scaling. But yeah, it's a bit weird.
Yeah. So gun to your head, what supplies do you take?
Ooh, I like ones that give me extra XP. I think the goggles or something, binoculars do that.
Yeah.
And then poison it's really bad to get poison. So I'd say don't plan for a best case scenario. Take some medicine. And I mean, if I have extra, I kind of will take the like prevent a trauma ones. But it's not a huge deal to get trauma, like blanket. And then the ones that I hate, like anything where I have to like search through the explore deck, I'm like, I don't have time for that. Like I'll just face plant into all the treacheries. I never.
Oh no, I love the is it the map? No, I forget.
The map and the compass, I feel like both kind of do that in certain scenarios.
So the one where you can like look at the top 2 cards of the encounter deck and just discard any treacheries, that feels so good to do.
Well, most of the scenarios you just get to like bottom it, and so it gets shuffled back in. There might be like
I think it's maybe the Doom of Estley that and that even might be torches in the Doom of Estley or something like that lets you do that. That's one of my favorite things. But yeah, I think I agree that the binoculars are, because it's not only you get XP, but I think it's like if you have the binoculars, you get XP, and if you don't, a member of your team takes a trauma.
Yeah. So
you're rewarded. It's probably the biggest swing between have and have not. So that's a definite must have. And I like taking the pendant too, you know?
That's a Dark Souls reference, I think. I don't know if you play the Souls games, but I know
not a lot.
Yeah. And the pendant, you also start off with it and it says like, this is useless.
Right.
So that like text is a total Dark Souls reference.
Oh, funny. Does it end up being useful in a surprising way in Dark Souls?
I can't remember actually how it ends up, if it stays useless or if it has a surprising use.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that was a Dark Souls reference, and the chat is backing you up there too. That's interesting. All right. If we have Ursula Downs, Leo Anderson, or Monterey Jack on the team, they become the expedition leader. Why do you think that they named 2 investigators and a random cheese?
I assume that that's just like Matt Newman's favorite cheese. But you know, it's also possible that an investigator named Monterey Jack will come out in a later expansion.
Yeah, I think it's the former, but you know, Matt loves his cheese.
But no, I did kind of. It's a fun little nod, like future proofing.
Yeah, I actually really appreciate that. And I'm kidding. I know that there is a Monterey Jack character in some of the other Arkham horror games. And presumably will be in this one someday. So the scenario itself, it kind of, it's funny. In retrospect, it feels pretty boring. Like it's to me, like it feels like it doesn't have a hook. Most scenarios have like something that you can describe in one sentence, like what's unique about that scenario. This one doesn't have that, but it is where we get introduced to an absurd number of new mechanics. Right? Like it's the first time we explore. It's the first time the alert keyword is in the game. It is the introduction to vengeance in Yig's Fury, and I have it in my notes. There's another one. Oh, poison. Right?
Yeah.
Yet another one. On top of the supplies getting utilized right off the bat on some of the locations. Yeah, so it's like nothing unique to this scenario, but a lot new to the game going on.
It's also the first time that you kind of make a choice to be pro-Snake or anti-Snake by either talking or fighting Aktaka, and then the second half of the scenario is different with either like the Snake's Esli tribesmen, I guess, being on your side or against you.
Right, so. Yeah, you meet Aktaka and can either fight her or parlay her. I have mixed feelings about the choice because I feel like it's not really a choice. I feel like when you reach her, one is obviously the thing that you're like equipped and able to do at the time. And the other is the thing that like, oh, we don't really have a fighter who can beat her, or they're almost dead or whatever. So it kind of sets your campaign going down one direction based on, I don't know, just which treacheries you've drawn before you got to her. But,
yeah, I guess. I mean, one of the issues with Forgotten Age is that, to be honest, you're unlikely to get any of the good story content on your first playthrough. So, you know, if you knew everything going in, you can get most of the story in Forgotten Age in 3 playthroughs. But like realistically, like I didn't max out any of the character paths or get like any of the like really hard to get endings on my first couple playthroughs.
Yeah.
So the first playthrough is almost just like a blind place plant. Where you're not going to really max out any of the story paths.
See, and that's why I'm going to try not to be negative on Forgotten Age this whole time, but I think that's a problem, right? Like, I think that the blind play is always the most fun play and the one you remember the most. And unquestionably, I think that the best time you spend playing Arkham is your blind plays of scenarios. So when that's kind of not as good in this campaign, I think that's an issue.
Yeah, although I will say, like, even though I didn't max out most of the story content, one of my blind playthroughs of Forgotten Age, I think I was kind of doing normal and hard around the same time. We kind of stumbled through it. We failed a lot of the scenarios, and at the very end, we like made a deal with the Yithians and like were able to win. And it was actually the first campaign we'd ever won on hard. The same group had gone through Zealot, we'd gone through Dunwich and Carcosa, and failed all of those in the end. So even though we stumbled through the whole thing and we sort of got a suboptimal ending, it was still the first time that we technically won. So it was a fun, like, kind of faceplant to victory, failing upwards type of playthrough.
I'm surprised because I feel like face planting to victory is one of the things that the game is normally very like that I love about the game, that Forgotten Age usually face plants is not to victory. It's just face plant. So I'm glad to hear you had that experience. I haven't had it.
It was so our Calvin died from trauma, and then we added a level 0 Joe for the last scenario, and he was actually really good because he had all of these insights that could just heal damage and horror. So it was like a weird, like that particular face planting of killing off the Calvin actually totally worked out.
I love it. The one other thing about the Ichitaka choices, it's when the chaos bag starts evolving, right? It's when you kind of get your first hint at what because basically every campaign treats the chaos bag differently. So this one it's cultist tokens if you befriend Ichitaka, and tablets as you befriend Alejandro, right?
Yeah.
And they just accumulate over the course of the campaign, and then late in the campaign it counts them and cares how many you have. So yeah, it's maybe the first hint that these characters are not really on your side. The fact that they're making the bag worse, the more close you get with them.
I mean, they would say that they're just like pissing off the bad people because they're good people, you know. Like if I'm pissing off the cultists, I'm doing something right.
That's true. I guess you okay. All right. You just don't know enough about the cultists or Ichitaka yet to put that explanation together.
I do kind of wish that they had come with custom snake tokens, though. That would have been
man, that would have been great. Yeah, I hope that Innsmouth putting new chaos tokens in the box is like a new thing. Like, yeah, I would love if that had been, if each campaign so far had kind of tokens that were unique to it. Vengeance points or Yig's Fury aren't just in the campaign log, they are tokens in the bag, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, so kind of with each scenario, I have some cards queued up to talk about in specific, and with any luck, they will. The first one will appear on the screen. Oh yeah, look at that live video production. I am so proud of myself. So the Pit Viper is just the most like quintessential example of poison, right?
Yep. It's also like the quintessential vengeance card because it's like super easy to kill. It's like way easier to kill than it is to not kill. Right. But do you want to get that vengeance this early?
Yep. Yeah, and it's a huge question, right? When you don't know what's coming actually, I would say that vengeance actually seems worse when you don't know what it is. I think that now, when I know what it is, I would much rather take one vengeance than deal with a Pit Viper for like in an important location for the whole scenario. You know.
Do you ever play stealth games like Metal Gear Solid or anything like that?
I like Invisible Ink. I like some turn-based stealth games. Metal Gear Solid's not my thing, but Mark of the Ninja is another good one I love.
A lot of these games, it's like you can do the slow and deliberate thing of like trying to sneak around the enemies, or you can just get impatient and be like, I don't want to bother with sneaking around these guys. I'm just going to murder them all. And I wonder how much overlap there is between the people who are like, I don't have the patience to like sneak by these enemies, right, and the people who are like, I'm not going to like evade all these snakes 10 times. I'm just going to kill him and get a vengeance.
That's a good point. It is a very video gamey decision to have to make. Yeah, let's see. What else did I queue up? Oh, so this is my most hated poison card, at least from the early campaign. Snakebite, which if you fail an agility test, either outright kills an ally asset you control because nothing can withstand 5 damage, or not only poisons you, but does a direct damage to you. This is one that on a blind play, you're probably going to take the second choice because losing an ally is like the worst thing that can happen to you most of the time in Arkham. But it's the wrong choice. Yeah.
Once you know it, you almost always take the first one. You don't necessarily discard the second copy of your allies in Forgotten Age once you're used to it. Also, agility is very important to this campaign, both for this and for Vengeance. So, which makes sense. You'd think in the jungle, like you need to be quick on your feet.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly thematic. Like, I think even poison and vengeance is maybe a more like kind of arbitrary theme, but I love the way snakes and poison evoke the theme, even though I don't like dealing with them in a game all that much. Like, they pretty much had to be there if you were going to the jungle, and especially if Yig was going to be the ancient one. Speaking of poison, creeping poison, this thing is the main reason not to be poisoned, pretty much. There's some other major punishments, but the surge card that's in like most of the scenarios and does a damage to all poison investigators every time anyone draws it. This is a problem.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, and surge is always annoying because like ward doesn't get rid of the surge part, so it always feels bad to ward these.
Yeah, right. Warding surge cards never feels good. But speaking of things you should ward, Arrows from the Trees debuts up front in Untamed Wilds and is in 1 or 2 other places. I was talking about Arkham trivia actually because there is going to be a trivia game being played as part of FarkhamCon, I think Saturday night. and we were like brainstorming trivia questions, and I was wondering what is the most damage that a single treachery can do. Like whether there's anything that is bigger than the Boundary Beyond. And then I streamed, it was actually Heart of the Elders, but we were playing on Twitch this week, and I was like, oh, well, this just did 7 damage to our team and could easily be double digits if a couple team members have charisma. This is like, the fact that it hits everyone at an ancient location is brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. This one definitely worth warding.
yeah, and it's and I see Thoth that here. Let's use a snazzy feature. Thoth makes a great point in the chat. Now it's on the screen that creeping poison and arrows from the trees show up in the first scenario, and there's actually not very many ancient locations in the first scenario, and you're probably not poisoned yet, so they actually aren't that bad, but they are ominous, and to be afraid of ancient locations and to be afraid of poison. So that is actually well framed. I like looking at it that way.
Yeah.
And then I just put this on here because this card is silly. Curse of Yig. This doesn't really seem to have anything to do with anything else in the campaign, but it occurs in a few places. This curse that starts turning you into a snake. You gain the serpent trait and lose a little combat and health. I don't know. Why do you think this is here?
So I love this one. First of all, for the completely like unnecessary gaining of serpent trait that does nothing. But this is also the one that when your Calvin player gets really low on health, they have to save a word of protection for this because there's no way to like tank the damage or anything. If you're at 1 health, you just die if you can't ward this. So I've definitely seen a lot of people like saving ward for Curse of Yig.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah, and I've been playing the Forgotten Age lately with Kyle playing Calvin on our team. So since he's always trying to redline, trying to have that one remaining health, this is like his biggest fear. So it does at least mechanically do something that like is unusual and kind of a unique threat. But yeah, it's so silly just because of the serpent trait and everything and turning into a snake, and it's just not. I thought that kind of similar to some of the other cards, this was the start of a theme that would develop, and it just doesn't, right? There's nothing else about like you might be becoming a snake. That's just not a thing.
Yeah, I kind of think it's better that like it's never like explained or like that nothing ever happens if you have a serpent trait. I sort of like the fact that it's a dead end. It's a red herring.
All right. I'll have to agree to disagree on that. All right. I think I don't know any other major notes on the Untamed Wilds we haven't touched on.
No, I mean I think like you said, it introduces most of the new mechanics. So for me, this is one of my favorite scenarios in this one. Like I wouldn't say it's the top 2 are pretty universally like the 3rd and the 7th, but this might be like my 3rd favorite. Like it's got this really cool new setting. It's got all these awesome new mechanics. And just like it's very flavorful that you're like in the jungle. You're like, how do I deal with these snakes? I don't want to kill them. Something bad will happen.
You prefer this over City of Archives?
Yeah,
that's madness. Okay, all right, we'll hash that out when we get there.
And then, I guess.
Go ahead.
I mean, probably maybe one of the big controversial things is like how much you like Explore. Like I love Explore. So this is a very Explore heavy scenario. I know that some people, like a lot of solo players, don't love it because it doesn't scale that well. But I never really play solo, so
I'm glad you brought that up because we actually kind of breezed over Explore, huh? That is obviously something that's super unique to this campaign, and it's in I think 7 of the 8 scenarios. It's like if you like Explore, it's a great campaign. If you don't like Explore, it's not so good because it is omnipresent. I have really mixed feelings on it. I think it's kind of busted, like the way it forces you to spend so many actions where it's like, great, I used an action to suffer a treachery. And as you mentioned, player scaling. At the same time, it's a really cool new use of the way of it being a card game where the locations are cards and kind of the map unfolds in a different way each time you play, and it uses the connectors that are on each card in a way that the game hasn't used any other time. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, like the way that you build the map is really neat. I also I don't know. I feel like it almost empowers you that you have some control over when you face treacheries. I almost always actually, there's way more times that I'm mad that I didn't draw a treachery with Explore than that I'm mad that I did draw a treachery. Like there's a lot of times that I'm like, I don't really want to go anywhere, but like I have
just hoping to get one out of the deck.
I just want to get a treachery out of the deck. So there's a lot of times when I'm actually mad that I don't draw a treachery with Explore.
Sure.
But I'm hardly ever mad that I did draw a treachery.
Yeah. And then one, I guess, criticism I have for it, and we'll see whether I don't know if Return has kind of the capacity to fix this, but Explore is almost always the same. Like the Boundary Beyond is different. We can talk about that there. And other than that, like it doesn't really, there aren't really twists on exploring. It is just kind of always the exact same mechanic. It's like, it's a deck, it's got treacheries. I guess Shattered Eons is a little different too, but for the most part, it's just printed on the actor agenda, and it works the same. Like, I wish that it mixed up more than it does.
Yeah, the one time that they do experiment with it in Boundary Beyond, it doesn't quite work. It's true that they could have tried to vary it more. I mean, it sort of just becomes like a basic mechanic more than like a scenario mechanic in this campaign. So if you think of it just as a basic mechanic, like revealing locations when you move on to them is like a basic mechanic that happens in 90% of scenarios. So like if you think of it that way, I think it's fine, but I can see wanting to switch it up.
Yeah. And I think it's got to be, it's just a kind of a evocative and versatile enough mechanic that I have to expect it will be back in a campaign someday. I just hope that it kind of has a little bit more twists and turns to how it works. I think there's definitely, I don't have any on the top of my head to suggest, but I have to think that there's some design space to mix that up a little more. All right, I want to check in with some recent comments from the chat. Jack Strozzi points out that there are hardly any cards in Untamed Wilds. Almost the whole scenario is made out of generic sets. I actually, as I was going through kind of prepping for this, I was looking through Arkham DB. I noticed that this was true of the campaign as a whole. It does not have a whole lot of cards specific to each scenario. And I think that's partly because a lot of it is taken up by, like 24 act cards, or there are just a lot of card slots spent on other things in some of them. But yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about kind of the variety in the encounter cards?
I think it's fine. I mean, the ones that are maybe a little disappointing that we'll talk about later is just the one pack that has 2 scenarios in it, like maybe is a little bit lighter, as well as Threads of Fate's a little bit lighter, but I think everyone, like that one's fine. So yeah, it never really bothered me.
Okay. Rice DW Lit says, and I had the same thought. I saw you say it, so I held on to it. I wonder if the Serpent trait will show up in the return box. That I think is really likely. I think that's something that there's no reason. Like return box changes are generally on the minor side, right? Like I don't expect it to overhaul supplies or anything that really like transforms the campaign. But this is more cards that combo with Curse of Yig or other things that work with the Serpent trait. Like, yeah, I totally expect that. I think that's a great call out. Let's see. Ire Demand W. No, this is Ian who's used this a lot. So the one thing that disappoints him about Explorer is that maybe, other than maybe Depths of Yacht, the Explorer mechanic on a later playthrough is just that you're looking for the same location. That's true. It preserves mystery on the blind play and then just becomes kind of another thing that you metagame on later plays.
Yeah, it does. It definitely becomes a little less thematic and more tactical, where like you might deliberately explore on a location that can't possibly find any locations because you have a ward or it's nigh existence in hand, and you're like, this is a great time for me to tank a treachery. Or you might be like, I'm not going to bother exploring here because it can't get the key location. I'm going to move here. Right. So it does, like a lot of things in Arkham, it becomes a little bit more tactical and less flavorful as you replay.
Sure. Yeah. And that's always going to be kind of a fact of the game. Like we were saying, you can just never recapture the blind play. All right, so then we go on to the Doom of Esley. First, we check supplies. The first time that we get punished for the ones we don't have. I jotted it down here. You take trauma if you don't have a blanket. You lose resources if you don't have provisions. You get XP if someone has binoculars, but take trauma if they don't. And poisoned people take trauma if they don't spend medicine to cure their poison. It's like I said, this campaign starts off with the gut punches and doesn't really let up.
I think this is one where a lot of Netrunner players had a better reaction than non-Netrunner players, because Netrunner has this card that's always been really powerful called Stim Hack, where you get a whole bunch of money and you make a run and you take some brain damage. And brain damage is not exactly the same as trauma, but it's a similar idea in that it's like bad for the rest of it. And what people that play a lot of Netrunner realize is that, like, actually, don't worry about the brain damage so much. Like, who cares?
Sure.
Like, just win the game. Like, don't worry about the future. Worry about the now. That was actually like a course at Netrunner card, so it kind of taught you that lesson early. But like naturally, if you didn't have that example of Stim Hack, people I think overrate how bad like long-term effects are. Like they're like, "Ooh, that's take trauma. It's so bad." So I think if you were used to Stim Hack, you're kind of like, you know what? Forget about the like mental trauma, physical trauma. Like just keep on trucking. Don't worry about it. But I think people that didn't have that experience were often like, "Ooh, this feels bad."
Yeah, and I'd say I was a Netrunner player. So maybe I would have hated it more if I weren't. I don't know. I do think that one benefit of the Forgotten Age is it's kind of where I learned that trauma is not all that bad, right? Like unless you end the game with one remaining health, then that physical trauma didn't actually do anything to you, right?
Yeah.
Or at least hit one remaining health at some point during the game.
It might have helped if Arcane Research was released before Forgotten Age. I think it was released after or during.
I want to say that was Circle Undone. Maybe someone can correct us.
But like, I feel like almost every Mystic on like an 8-scenario campaign takes it because they're just like, who cares about a couple of mental trauma? So that kind of also teaches you that like, don't worry about trauma that much.
Yeah.
During.
That said, though, this campaign it's pretty easy to have like 6 or 7 trauma by the end, and then it starts to become a problem.
Yeah, I mean, this campaign you might consider not taking it, but like if, for example, Carcosa, it had been released during Carcosa, people would be used to the idea of trauma, and it would not be as upsetting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're probably right. All right, well. Doom of Esley, then it works. The first part of it works pretty similarly to the Untamed Wilds, right? You start at a single location, you're exploring a webbed map. It's just got kind of the other side of the cards that we're going to see a lot of again, which is cave-based cards. Mm-hmm. And whoops, I did not mute my iPad. Do not disturb. Cave-based cards, and then this introduces us to the whole like time is falling apart thing, right? I think that this is the first taste of it, is that you have treacheries that are around getting like things are lost in time or sent back in time or whatever. And
the biggest thing is that certain endings of it, you replay the scenario, which I didn't get on my first playthrough, but there are some endings where it's just like, oh, we didn't get what we came for. Let's go back in the cave. And it's not framed as a time loop, but it's trying to get that kind of hint in your head of cycles.
Right. Yeah, and I'd say I wish that for a campaign, and maybe it does not need more through line mechanics, but like I wish that for as central as like the time unraveling is to the campaign, I wish that it had a more continuous mechanic, or like. Right, like every time card does something different. It shuffles something into your deck. It makes you lose actions. There's kind of no cohesion to like right? Like those cards don't really combo with each other in a way that like Poison and Vengeance do.
Or the milling effects in which like how that was a whole theme.
Yeah, exactly. Or caring about how much horror you have on you in Carcosa. Like I kind of felt like time should have kind of that level of through line, and it doesn't. Maybe the return box will add one. I'd like to see it, and I think that's something that they could do with just a couple enemies and treacheries. I don't know what it would be. time travel is a difficult thing to capture in a card game.
Yeah, it's something that I think honestly video games do better. Like it's much easier in a video game to be like, hey, you're gonna like rewind time and like make a different decision, or you have to like loop through this thing like 3 times to get all of the different story paths or whatever. But like in a physical card game where you have to like set things up again, there's only so many times you can really make people like rewind and reset up things before you drive them crazy. And if you say something like, hey, like change your assets back to the way they were 3 turns ago, it's like, do I remember that? Like, probably not.
Right. Literally turning back time has issues. I mean, even why
actually Jextracity, undo the last 2 turns. Like that's if this was a digital card game, I think there absolutely would be cards like that. But it's just not realistic to tell people to do that.
Yeah, and the game's even dabbled. Is it Time Warp? What's the card that resets an action? Even that has issues because people ask like, well, what do you do if you searched the top 6 cards of the deck and then shuffled it? Right? You can't reset that. So yeah, it is obviously difficult. So yeah, maybe there just isn't an answer to that. But for as big a part of kind of the story as it is, I'm like surprised that it doesn't come through the mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they'll come up with something cool and unexpected in return too. I mean, that would be neat.
Yeah, it would be neat. There's got to be something in that box. See what it is. Yeah, I guess kind of. I don't think. I think that the scenario doesn't become noteworthy until I think it's Act 3, after you make it to the Chamber of Time, pick up the Relic of Ages, and that's when the map transforms.
Yeah.
It's you've been putting Doom on locations for various effects. It takes them all. It was this like webbed map. It takes them all and puts them into a straight line based on the amount of Doom in it. So it's not even in a predictable order, and then makes you get out past probably enemies that you left where they were because they weren't hunters, and have vengeance on them. And I actually love this moment. How do you like it?
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, we're not used to having to think about like that side of backtracking, and if you are going for more of an evade-based strategy, it's typically like, oh, as long as I'm a couple steps ahead of them, I'm fine.
Right.
In this case, a couple steps ahead, still not good enough.
Right. I think we played this on our blind play. A friend that we were playing with was playing Finn, and I can't remember whether he got out, but I want to say that he had a 4 successful evade turns. The rest of us could run by. It was the most epic like evasion situation I'd ever seen was in this scenario.
Yeah, he did that, and I think we were still trying to like be really cautious with the vengeance. So we were like, like evade everything.
Yep. And the one other thing, at least now, about this scenario or about this like aspect of the scenario is it's one of the most easily just like completely cheated and trivialized, I think, hooks to a scenario that I've seen. Like elusive or astral travel or now open gate is what I used most recently to completely just skip this part of this scenario. if you know it's coming, it is not hard to just beat.
Yeah, and now there's safeguard too, where like if your guardian can tank the damage or something, you can just walk by the enemies and then everyone else can follow them.
Yep. You can spend your first couple XP on some shortcut attachments.
Yeah.
What are those? Shortcut level 2, I think.
Yeah.
Just fly through there. Yeah.
This is probably, of all of the fixes that they can make for return to, this is the one I'm most expecting, because like the return twos are famous for, if there's a really easy cheese strategy, fixing that. So like Knight of the Zealot, there was the cheese strategy of like, I'm not going to try to prevent the Umordoth from appearing. I'm just going to set up to fight him. And they fixed that and made it way, way harder if you do that strategy. Right. So I would expect there to be some card that like attaches to the agenda that says like card effects may not move you to a different location or something.
Sure. Yeah. You may not move except to locations connected to your current location. Something like that. That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I guess I've probably cheesed this scenario for the last time, haven't I? At least as long as if I'm playing return. That's sad. No, actually, I like that. I don't love, even though I wanted. What am I saying? I don't love cheesing scenarios. The reason I made it my mission to do it last time was because I have been trying to make Open Gate a good card. That is a card that when we reviewed it, I thought really highly of, and then have just not found it to be very useful at all. So I specifically packed Open Gates in my deck for the Untamed Wilds and dropped one at the entrance and won the Chamber of Time, and we just got out, and it was great. That's so a couple specific cards that are kind of noteworthy. Ancestral Fear is another real Sophie's choice when it comes to vengeance. You have to either place a Doom on your location or put it in the victory display and get vengeance. I really like that vengeance isn't just limited to like enemies that you don't want to kill. Like I think that this is a really cool decision, and it's one that remains really difficult even when you know the campaign.
Yeah, it seems a little excessive that this is also Peril and Surge. Like it's a bad enough effect that this probably doesn't need either, and certainly doesn't need both.
Yeah. You're right. Surge in particular is just a slap in the face on this card. Like it feels bad enough doing either of these things, and then to surge into another card, like woof. And it doesn't make you feel great about placing the Doom and discarding it either, because at least at higher player counts you might shuffle, or I can't remember if the acts or agendas reset the encounter deck very much in this scenario, but you feel like, well, it can just come up again and it'll just surge again.
Yeah, and I can't remember, does the Doom stay on locations in this scenario?
It does. Yeah. There's only 2 agendas, so it only holds over one time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it does.
It's still like kind of worse than Ancient Evils and has Peril and Surge.
Right. Yeah. Later in the game, when you're on the second agenda, you can kind of math out like, all right, how much do we care about the Doom? Yeah. But when you're early on and it's like, oh, this Doom's basically going to count twice, which you even on a blind play, because the agenda I think says when advancing, do not remove the Doom. Like I think that's explained up front. Yeah, it's a rough one. And then, this maybe says something about the Harbinger that we didn't bring her up yet, but we meet the Harbinger in this scenario. What are your thoughts on the Harbinger of Volusia?
So yeah, she's an interesting one. Tons of health, but you almost irrelevant. Like you technically can kill her, but there's almost no reason to, because by the time you would have killed her, you'd be near the end of the campaign and you'd get 5 vengeance for it and no VP for it.
Yeah.
But other than like the weirdness of like, why do they even have this ability to kill her permanently? I do kind of like the idea of this like hunter enemy, this like popping up every scenario to chase you. They obviously reused it in Circle Undone, sort of with the Spectral Watcher.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever really drew that connection, but those are 2 very similar mechanics.
I think it's just cool thematically, the idea that there's this crazy serpent chasing you.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly ups the difficulty, and seeing Vengeance 5 printed on a card is scary. But yeah, I kind of don't get it. Like, she just shows up again and again, and you just evade her a few times. Usually, you're unlikely to kill her, but you do keep track of her damage over the course of the campaign. I expect the return box will do something more with this.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if she had slightly less HP and then she had maybe 3 VP, 3 Vengeance, maybe then you consider killing her. So I could see them doing something like that.
Doovies says, Doovies Twitch in the chat says, play a 4-player game, deal 10 damage, and then have players drop out and play Threads of Fate solo, and she dies. Never thought of that. That's a pretty good plan. Because I guess her maximum health scales with the current number of players, but the damage would stick around. That's a pretty good strat. I like that.
The other thing that I could see is like maybe they don't even change her, but if in return they give you like a cool benefit in the last scenario, if you have tons of vengeance, like, oh, the Yithians arrive and they like give you this awesome armada that's like helping you because you did such a great job of pissing off the snakes. that would be like a fun way to encourage you to kill her.
Yeah, completely agreed. And it's it reminds me of Return to Dunwich, where you could rescue Peter Clover in that version of extracurricular activity, and there just wasn't a lot of reason to do so, and it was one of the hardest things in the campaign to accomplish. And
also
so
pretty much requires cheesing with Open Gate or Elusive or whatever.
Right, pretty much does. And so the return box added Naomi as kind of weirdly as a reward you get much later in the campaign if you rescued him, but still an extra incentive and a pretty strong payoff for pulling it off. So I would love to see something like that, whether it's in the form of an ally that's on your side, or whether she drops her crown and you get to wear it. I don't know. It adds a head slot item. It's the only one in the game. It's the crown. Derby K says that they like Harby. That took me a second. The Harbinger more than Spectral Watcher, just because noting the damage on the campaign log gives it some permanence, kind of some, at least a feeling like you're making an impact. I would argue that you aren't making one, but I agree that is cool. That you do track it and you do feel like you're like permanently injuring her.
Yeah, I think on the blind playthrough where you're like, oh man, maybe there is a cool like reason to kill her. It's pretty cool. On the second and third playthrough where you're like, there's no reward for it, other than like maybe I don't have to deal with her in like the 7th scenario or something, but I have to deal with like an extra doom from having 5 more vengeance. So it's cooler in the blind playthrough.
Totally. All right, we're finally getting to some good scenarios here. First, I want to mention, I said I was going to plug this a couple times. For our stream tomorrow, we need your help building our decks. Let's see. Good. I still have the link on my clipboard. I'm posting it in the chat. It is a link to a Google form where you can submit 1 card to each of the decks that will be playing Murder at the Excelsior Hotel with tomorrow in what we're calling the Ultimatum of Crowdsourced Chaos. So please help us. I've seen the decks in progress. They were about 2/3 built last I glanced at them. They're not looking great. So help us out. Please give Calvin some soak. And then I also just want to plug, if you're meeting us for the first time, Optimal Play is actually primarily a YouTube channel, youtube.com/optimalplay, or there's a link on our Twitch page. So normally we don't record these live. We record them a good, I don't know, we spend pretty much like a whole week recording each one and then stitch together the only usable parts that come from it and put it on YouTube. So that's normally where they land. We would love if you'd follow us there. And we have lots of both archives of live streams and edited playthroughs of Arkham and other games there. So we have a lot of fun making it. I hope you'll check it out. Threads of Fates. I love Threads of Fates.
It's really cool.
Yeah, this is probably not only, I think, one of your and my favorite scenarios, but it seems like universally, but very popularly a favorite scenario of lots of people if you ask them. And
it's kind of inverted because the third scenario is often pretty unpopular. Like I think Dunwich and Carcosa, it was like the worst scenario in each of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, that like just totally flipped. I happen to also love the first 2 of Forgotten Age, but for a lot of people who didn't like them quite as much, it was like, the reverse of Dunwich and Carcosa, where the third one's much better than the first 2.
Yeah, I love it. It's incredibly unique. 3 threads, 3 acts. It's kind of conjures like you made it to town in an RPG, and there's all these quest givers almost, and it's up to you what you do and in what order. But unlike those games, it has time pressure making it tough to accomplish everything. So I would say I could actually stand to this being a little more difficult, because I think a number of times that I've played it, I have accomplished everything, and it would be nice if you had to if the decision of which ones you were going to pursue felt a little harder. But it's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I finished everything in my first couple playthroughs, but you definitely can when you know it a bit better. It does have that feeling of like the first 2 got me lots of trauma, and maybe I didn't get as much XP as I wanted because I failed on some of them. But this one, if you finish a couple of these paths, you end up with like 10 XP and you probably don't have any trauma. So all of a sudden, the power level of your characters goes up a bunch because you got XP without trauma.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I just like, I honestly like, I took notes on, I didn't have a lot to say. I just like the scenario. It's the only one set in Arkham. And weirdly, because it's almost out of place in a campaign that is not about the city of Arkham at all, but it's the first time that we get a lot of like classic Arkham locations that haven't been in the game yet, right? Like I was really happy to see Velma's Diner. And weirdly, when you go there, I think it's like the only Arkham game where you don't go and spend resources to heal, like buy food at Velma's Diner. I think you overhear rumors and get clues.
I almost wonder if they originally thought of having this be set in like Mexico City or something, but then they realized it's going to take so many cards to do all these different acts and agendas that we have to like reuse like core set locations. Because to your point about it being the only one in Arkham, the campaign easily could have worked if everything was in Mexico.
You're right. And you do go right back to Mexico City and have some story there right after this. Right? I think it's in Mexico City. Yeah. Yeah, you could be right. I guess they didn't have because it does reuse a lot of Midnight Masks locations, and when it used, I think literally 24 slots in the Mythos pack or acts. I think also this was the Mythos pack. It might still be the Mythos pack with the fewest player cards in it, because the scenario was so big. Yeah, that's a good point. That efficiency might have been key there.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, personally at least, Midnight Mass is by far my favorite Night of the Zealot scenario. So like, I don't mind seeing some of those cards again.
Yeah, and it conjures Midnight Masks both in having literally like Hunting Night Gaunts in some of the same locations, but it also has, and we'll talk about this in Boundary Beyond too, actually reminds me of Midnight Masks in its own ways, but the like degrees of success. The feeling that you probably can't do it all. In Thread's Fate, you kind of do. I think it's easier than Midnight Masks, but the like you need to make decisions. Who is most important to go after? Also evokes Midnight Masks for me. And before you go in, by the way, this is where you make choices on both Ichitaka and Alejandro relationships. These ones, unlike before, were actual choices, like just outright like, do you feel like befriending them or not type choices.
Yeah, this is one of the first scenarios with like really a lot of text at the beginning. The later campaigns have plenty of scenarios with like lots of story, but it wasn't so common in the early campaigns. So there's lots of story paths, and including this is where you get set on the path to get the secret 9th scenario. If you follow the right choices to not side with either Alejandro or Ichitaka. I think it's very rare to get this on your first playthrough.
Sure.
But
yeah, that one has remained a secret to me. I've never done it.
Yeah. So at this point, if you forge your own path, you remove both of them from your decks. And if you get them again, you get 2 XP instead of adding them back to your deck. And it also removes all of their side's tokens, but adds 3 Elder Thing tokens. So it has a number of gameplay effects, so it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I want to try it sometime. Maybe I'll try it on my return play. I don't know. Yeah. I currently have 2 concurrent Forgotten Age campaigns going with different groups of people. So, and neither one of them are we forging our own path. So, oh, that's right. Yeah. Are you looking at the chat? You get an Elder Thing token.
Yeah. So you only get 1 Elder Thing token. No, you don't get all 3 of them yet, but you'll eventually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You get them over time. I want to call out too that Arkham, like I think it's well written in general, but it has a few moments that I just really love the writing here, where pretty much all the flavor text has been like your journal entries so far. And when Ichitaka shows up at your door and it's a journal entry, and then it just says the journal entry ends abruptly, and then it transitions to like normal narrative. Like you hear a knock at the door. Like I think that's an awesome moment.
Yeah, it honestly, it kind of went over my head the first time I played it, but you're right. It is a cool little switch.
Yeah. It's a really cool example of writing that you don't see that kind of type of like not wordplay, but just like narrative play in a tabletop game.
Yeah, it almost makes the first 2 scenarios feel like a prologue. But what's a cool twist is that they weren't like the rest of the campaign is more like the first 2 than they are like this. But this one almost makes it feel like, oh, the first two were like this weird prologue in the jungle, but now we're like in Arkham and it's the present day, and like, so you kind of don't know what's going to happen after this because it gives you that feeling that the first two were different.
I think it even is, maybe it's the interlude before this or something, but it actually says like the expedition's end is the title of it, something like that. Like the story declares the expedition completes, and then it's the event of Threads of Fate that make you realize, like, oh, actually we have to go back.
Yeah.
Thoth a minute ago in the chat mentioned the absurdly mean Brotherhood cultists, making it feel a little like Midnight Masks, which is a perfect segue because they are the ones that I have queued up to complain about. We introduced this was, I think, packaged in the deluxe box, but we meet the Brotherhood cultists for the first time, which have some of the cards that are some of the most like punishing, doomy encounter cards, I think, in Arkham. This one is just it like leaves me speechless. Not only does it get permanently stronger and harder to kill each time you fight it, like, so it's one of the most punishing failures, right? Like, you draw the auto fail on this and it's permanently harder to pass next time, but it also adds a doom every time it does that. It's just brutal. This guy is sitting in a chair reading a book. He does not look very assuming, but man, I hate this card.
I do like that there's ways to kind of cheat a bit and like attack something else. So flamethrower, storm of spirits, and the rogue Tommy gun, you can all like attack other people and still kill this, or at least damage it. So it's always fun when you figure out a way to like somehow damage it without actually attacking it.
Mano a mano finally good here. Yeah.
Agnes, if you can do it 3 times.
True. Yeah, I guess that's the real test here. But I don't feel like, if anything, I feel like I'm doing testless damage less often than I used to. In like 2020 Arkham, maybe it's just because there's so many good weapons and spells now.
Yeah,
I feel like I used to do a lot more, backstab, and
I think that with the card pool being as big as it is, it's now generally a better strategy to be really good at tests rather than like not doing tests.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many ways to be actually really good at your tests.
Right. That makes sense.
But I mean, Agnes is probably still good. It's also just we're a little bored of her,
Yeah, that's totally true. And then the other card, it's also, oh no, I lied. I was about to say that this is also in the Brotherhood Cultists encounter set, but Conspiracy of Blood is actually unique to Threads of Fate. Also, it actually has a lot in common with the Brotherhood Cultist, though, where it kind of effectively adds a doom. It attaches to the agenda and reduces the doom threshold of the agenda. But then to clear it, you have to parlay a cultist enemy, testing willpower 4, and if you fail, you place a doom on that enemy. So in your attempts to to basically improve the situation by 1 doom can cause more doom, and not even limited to just 1 more doom if you keep trying. This is one of my most hated treacheries.
It's kind of a precursor to Circle Undone has a lot of cards that like rely on an enemy to kind of mitigate them, where you might need to parlay a cultist or to evade a witch or something. So it reminds me of that a lot. And then Dream Eaters also has several cards that attach to the agenda. So this is a bit of a precursor of things to come.
Yeah, you see that a lot in Arkham. Like Alert was not the first time that an enemy would attack you if you failed to evade it. It was just keyworded and became really prevalent there. You see kind of bits and pieces of old stuff fleshed out into new mechanics, and you're totally right. This is a good example of that. I think that was it. The encounter cards are not really the interesting part of Threads of Fate. It's all the acts.
I did have a fun time at the end of this scenario once, where I was pretty sure that if the Doom advanced, that you just like lost and like maybe got a trauma or something bad happened in the next scenario. Because that's what happens in Midnight Mass. Like you would just assume it's the same thing.
Right.
But so we had this Finn player who had Sharon's Obel, and I was like, let's try to finish all the paths. Like I know we're getting really close on time, but like let's try to do it. And he was like, I don't know, maybe I should resign. I was like, no. Like even if we don't get them all, I'm sure it's just like a minor inconvenience, like Midnight Mass. So we pull off this crazy combo turn that requires like passing 5 different tests to like kill the last enemies to get the last agenda. And we do win, but we flip over the last agenda and it says like, you all die. And the Finn player with Shiraz Opal was like, why did you make us do that?
Yeah, or not die, but you're all defeated, right? And then Finn died because of, yeah, I think that happens more later in the game. I think you're often defeated by the last agenda. I feel like that's a thing.
I guess Midnight Mass was unusually like soft in that all it did was like add a doom to the next scenario or something.
Right. Yeah.
I actually kind of wish there was more variety in the like fail effects.
Yeah,
I like.
It would be. I would. I guess take the things that punish you arbitrarily for not having the right supplies, like losing resources or cards in hand or something, and use them as effects for failing the previous scenario instead. They'd feel more fair to me then, and mix up variety a little bit. Yeah, I like that. We got a couple tips for the Brotherhood Cultists in the chat. Legrek says, if you have a problem with Threads of Fate, try adding handcuffs to your deck. Yeah, does handcuffs shuffle them in, though? I'm trying to remember. I don't know that I've ever played handcuffs, to be honest.
I don't know, but I do think that, like, calling handcuffs Threads of Fate, like, for any, like, bedroom activities, could, like, spice things up a little bit. You know?
Some police activity at your house.
Yeah, they're getting too crazy.
And then where did I see this comment? Oh yeah, Derby K says this guy really wants to be Spectral Razored, which that's just the right amount of damage for that card to kill it in one attack. I like that.
Yeah, I think that we have a lot more 3 damage options now than we did when this came out.
Yeah, you've got some XP also to have bought a 3 damage weapon by now. Or Spectral Razor is a great fit. Okay, well, after the high of Threads of Fates, we move on to Boundary Beyond. But first we resupply again. We've only really had our supplies checked once, and then we get to buy more. I don't like. There's new supplies though. There's the pocket knife, the pickaxe. Again, I've got these in front of me. I don't just know them off the top of my head. Gasoline, I think, was not available at first. I don't know. Any thoughts on on the resupply?
I remember there's like 1 or 2 I think that you can't buy unless you bought it the first time. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'd have to compare these 2 lists, but that is true. I think like can you not buy torches the second time?
Maybe.
Yeah, you can't buy torches the second time, which they actually matter quite a bit going forward. So I'm surprised by that.
But that seems fine.
You get even fewer points. You get 3 whole supply points each in a 4-player game. Ooh, you can each get provisions and 1 thing, and that's if no one's going to get gasoline. And then this is where you can. This is, I think, the only time the game has done this, but you can spend experience to heal trauma, and also experience to heal poison. Although they have medicine for that too.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad exchange rate. I feel like it doesn't need to be XP for a trauma. It could be 3 or 4.
It's something that I feel like the community was asking for a while, like the ability to spend XP to heal trauma. And I do think that was kind of from an era when people thought trauma was worse than it was, like we talked about. But yeah, it's a weird little opportunity, and it's kind of weird that the game has never done it again. Maybe just an admission that there's more trauma in this campaign than any other. Yeah,
I think it's that the other campaigns don't have as much trauma, and also like no one would pay 5 XP in another campaign. You could maybe offer for 3 XP or something.
Yeah. Do you want to heal that 1 trauma, or do you want a flamethrower? Like, easy choice. And then it immediately checks your supplies right after you buy supplies. Then it's like, do you have gasoline? I thought that was a little silly that they're back to back like that. You could almost just read ahead like 1 paragraph and see what supplies you need to buy. But yeah, you lose your mulligan if you don't have gasoline. And then you get to Boundary Beyond. How do you like Boundary Beyond?
This is where the campaign starts to kind of go downhill for me. It's a really cool idea. So you start off in modern day Mexico City, and then you start like switching over to like ancient Tenochtitlan. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah.
Super cool thematically, but just like not very fun. Like
we have a lot of opposite opinions. I like Boundary Beyond quite a bit, actually. It's brutally difficult, but it is like a degrees of success thing where it's just and I felt like when the core set came out, people didn't like Midnight Mass for the same reason. Like it's kind of tuned around you probably getting about 2 out of 6 of your objectives, right?
I think that the difference is that Midnight Mass is a little more satisfying because you're always progressing. And like Boundary Beyond, you're like, oh, I got 2 of them. Now I'm down to 1. Now I'm down to 0. Now I'm back to 1.
And we will definitely be looking at the encounter cards that cause that. Yeah, this can actually take your hard-earned progress and just reverse it. Which, hey, time travel theme. I guess that guess that's bound to happen.
But like, so the it fits in with the theme. But the fact that like I feel like you tend to get like 1 on this the first time, and like if you do really really well on like another playthrough, you get like 3. Yeah. As opposed to Midnight Mass, where it's more like you get 3 on your first, and if you do really, really well in a future one, you get like all 6.
Yeah,
It's just like much more satisfying that like Midnight Mass, you tend to go for like middle, and then you progress to like really good, as opposed to like you get almost nothing on your first. That's Boundary and Beyond.
Right. And to recap a little bit, for if anyone's kind of unfamiliar with the or forgets has blocked out maybe the gist of why am I blanking? I'm just having a brain fart on the name of the scenario. The Boundary Beyond. Unlike most of the Explorer scenarios, this one starts with the map fully on the table. But when you explore, you are looking for an alternate version of the location you are currently at, and it replaces that location with I think it's always a past version, right? I don't think you ever go to the future. It's like an ancient version of the location, making those arrows from the trees hurt. And I love it because it's the only time I think that the Explorer mechanic is substantially like twisted. It's out of 7 scenarios, 8 scenarios really, if you count 2 in Heart of the Elders. It's the only time that it's the only time it feels different from the other times, and I really really like that.
I actually think, though, that it probably shouldn't have been the Explorer mechanic. Like, I think that there's other ways to accomplish this that are a little bit more successful. So we've seen a few different ways of like replacing scenarios. Like, there's a scenario in Circle Undone where you just like find the spectral version of all the cards and just replace them all at once. There's ones where you flip scenarios. I think actually flipping might have made more sense here if it was just like, do this test. If you succeed, flip it to the ancient side. If you fail, leave it on the modern day side. Explore doesn't really add anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. You could, they could be double-sided, and you could still have alternate versions. You would just randomly choose one of them at the start of the game when you set up. I hadn't really thought about that. That this is like this twist on Explorer is kind of like unnecessary Explorer. But hey, you still get those treacheries you love so much.
I do love treacheries, so but it could be something like that could be part of the test. Is like to test this, draw a treachery, and then test your will or something.
Sure, yeah, that's true. It absolutely could. And then the other thing about the exploring here is that, and here what I wrote in my notes here in all caps is, but why do the connections change? Oh God, why? You could almost be excused for not noticing this on your blind play, but when you explore a new version of a scenario, the connection icons at the bottom change, forcing you to constantly think about, well, how are all these locations currently linked to one another? And it creates one-way connections that didn't used to be one-way, and that is just a brain buster that I think is like kind of cool that the map changes, but is not worth, like, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that.
Yeah, I can see why they thought it was cool, but it didn't work.
No. And it is like the main scenario I point to if people are looking into or wondering if they need to buy or invent, whether it's pipe cleaners, whatever, have like connection, some kind of token to indicate connections. I think that it's a must-have to play this scenario. I don't think you can play it without those. And then the one other kind of aspect of this scenario is so that those degrees of success actually are like locked in 2/3 of the way through, and then it becomes a boss fight against this Padma Amarita, who you meet in the story text in Mexico City immediately before the scenario. I think it's the fastest like heel turn I've ever seen. Yeah. I actually kind of like that because it's not unusual when a character that's been with you for a while or that you met a while ago like turns out to be the villain. It is kind of unusual when you have a single friendly interaction with a character and then the next interaction is like, oh wait, they're the villain. I actually kind of appreciate that.
Yeah. It is a bit weird that it's like a degrees of success scenario, but that still has a boss fight because at least personally, I often do terribly at this scenario, but I've like never lost it. So it's kind of like I'll do poorly. I'll get like 1 or 2 cities, but then like Padma shows up and I just have to kill her and it's pretty easy, but it's just like more stuff I have to do to get this miserable scenario over with. So I don't know that I love having like a boss after a degrees of success type scenario in general.
Yeah, it's a weird combo. It almost feels like it wanted to be 2 scenarios. This is where we'll get to Heart of the Elders in a minute. This is the one that should have been 2 mini scenarios, not Heart of the Elders, maybe. The one other the other thing is the Harbinger's back. It's just I have nothing more to say about that. But hey, Harbinger's here. Don't know why she is and isn't there at certain times, but she's here. Looking at a couple cards. This is the one. This is the one that takes you've made it to a location, you've explored, you've cleared you've usually I think suffered a punishment for exploring, right? Like most of the locations do something bad to you when they interplay.
Yeah.
And then you've gotten all the clues off of a location, and now this makes you either put a doom on the agenda or shuffle that back into the explore deck and start all over. I think that Window to Another Time is like one of the biggest reasons people dislike this scenario.
Yeah, like I've seen some cheesy things where like you basically give up on one of the locations that's like easy to flip, and so you just like someone stays in that location and like flips it every turn, so that when Window to Another Time comes up, you like unflip it. I've seen other people say, yeah, just take Doom every time.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing about this, and it's some of the Ancient Evils variants are based like this is actually not as bad as Ancient Evils because it's Ancient Evils with an alternate choice, right?
Well, it's a little worse in that because it's peril, people can't ward to it.
They can't like cancel it for you. Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm looking at chat as they say, yeah, always Doom. Hell, after a certain point, I want more Doom. Like that's how badly you just want the scenario to be over sometimes. Like I've gotten all the locations I'm gonna get. Now let's just end it.
I do think though that like you have less time to get the 6 locations in Midnight Mass, so like that's why the Doom feels so much worse. Like because they have this weird little epilogue where you fight Padma, you don't really actually have that much time to get the locations.
Yeah, that's a good point. It does seem like you have more time than you have. And then Padma. Just figured we'd take a look at her. Victory and Vengeance. What's brutal about her is this thing where you have the option to either fight her or to get more clues and spend them to end the encounter, right? But you cannot discover clues at any ancient location if she is ready, which means in solo you're like trying to evade her, move, and investigate, and then repeat every single round. It's pretty intense. I mean, she is Hunter, so you can try to lead her down into the locations you want to get clues from. But this is like one of the most elaborate and difficult, I think, enemies, at least, especially if you want to go with a clue route. But she's also, when she attacks you, flipping your clues to their Doom side. She's rough.
Yeah, I guess the solo aspect of it had not really occurred to me because I've never played Forgotten Age solo. I think for most other player counts, it's like not a big deal because like if you're going for the no vengeance playthrough, you must have brought a high evade character with you. Sure. And if you're not going for the no vengeance playthrough, it's like, I'll just kill her. Like whatever. So I think it's mostly solo that it's a big deal, but I can see that being annoying.
Let's see. Derby K likes her a lot as an enemy. Really strong, some fancy mechanics. Wish she had some earlier setup in campaign text. Yeah, it is a little abrupt. I saw Thoth point out in the chat that she's not like your friend when you meet her. She's just kind of a person you interact with, which that's fair. So it's not like this is a huge trying to be a huge gotcha moment or something. But yeah, it's weird to have her be like a mid scenario twist, but you just learned so little about her. Again, I'm not actually saying that's a bad thing. I think that's kind of it kind of subverts expectations in a fun way. All right, Heart of the Elders. So I wrote my notes in a kind of an outline. If you think like a high school essay outline format, my first bullet point is just ugh. That's the entire thing. I think this is the worst scenario in Arkham Horror, the card game. You agree, or is there anything you hate more?
I think you're probably right. Yeah, it's especially that first playthrough that I think we both did together.
Oh yeah,
like 5 times or something. Mm-hmm. Some of which we accomplished absolutely nothing. Very, very frustrating. The cyclical idea is like cool in theory, fits thematically. It's not at all fun.
No, it has some things that I like the way. This is an example of using your what am I saying? This is an example of using your progress in the previous scenario in a pretty interesting way, right? The fewer locations you finish in the Boundary Beyond, the more clues you have to get in this scenario, which is cool. It's frustrating when you come out of Boundary Beyond like beaten up and only got one location to then see this, but it's a cool play.
It's another example of Forgotten Age kind of snowballing. It's actually, if you remember back to Dunwich actually had a lot of anti-snowball stuff where I was like, oh, if you fail, get XP. And that was the most extreme example of anti-snowball, which I actually really like. And this campaign is the most extreme example of snowballing.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Some other scenario or other campaigns rubber band instead of snowball, to use the lingo that makes no sense if you haven't heard it before. But this to me, so one of the best things about Arkham in my mind has always been that it doesn't, or one of my favorite things about it, I guess best is, I don't want to say objectively best, but it doesn't use the words win and lose very often, right? You can fail forward almost all the time. And no matter how poorly you, actually failing means your story is going to play out in a way that you might not have seen otherwise, right? You actually get to read something new because you failed at this time or something like that. It kind of feels like its own reward. And this one takes that great thing about the game, shatters it on the ground and says, play this over and over and over until you succeed. And then throws some of look at Apex Strangleweed, throws some of the most brutal enemies that have been in just random non-boss enemies in Arkham. It's unpleasant. And yeah, our blind playthrough, I think it was at least 4 attempts for us to get this done. It's just put a permanent bad taste in my mouth for this scenario. And then I also think it's fundamentally broken. I think this is another thing that Return will probably fix, but what you don't know on your blind playthrough is that the best thing to do is actually hoard all your clues and spend them all at the end. Not even advance the first act and cause that Winged Serpent to appear until you're ready to just end the scenario. And but the design of all the cards points to you should be discovering the pillars on a periodic, regular basis because it exhausts enemies and does these things. But it's just not the best way to actually accomplish scenarios. I think it's kind of doesn't work as intended in a lot of ways too. And it has another really punishing supply check right before it. I don't know. I have very little positive to say about this. flavor-wise, like it feels exactly like the first scenario of the campaign. It even uses a lot of the same locations. I don't know. I guess I'll stop ranting, and unless you have anything to add, I'm going to look at a few of the cards, and we can move on to fun scenarios.
Yeah, I'm ready to move
on. The Winged Serpent is on the back of the first act. It's pretty rare that, well, no, maybe it's not that rare that advancing the act causes an enemy. I'm trying to think. Like,
yeah, it definitely happens.
Which is it on in the no? I guess it's on the agenda in the Midnight Masks. Yeah, so this thing can't be killed. It's massive, but it doesn't make attacks of opportunity. So it actually just kind of sits in a location, being a minor nuisance the whole scenario. And when you return to the scenario, because you don't pass it the first time, it's there right when you start. Yeah, it's just annoying, and it has that force effect that rewards you for placing pillars regularly, but overall that's the wrong choice to make. Yeah. The chat is saying this scenario is going to get a big reboot in return. I completely agree. The Basilisk, really similar. Placing the way you're meant to deal with it is placing those pillars, and you don't want to do that. So it's just you just evade it forever or take the vengeance. I don't know.
Yeah, this one I like. At least if they fix like the hoarding clue strategy, I do think this is kind of an interesting enemy. The fact that you have an alternate way to deal with it.
Yeah, if they like. I don't want them to just fix the hoarding by forbidding it. By, investigators can only hold 3 clues or something. Yeah. It would fix it, but it would just make the scenario even harder, and it's already a punishing, hard, not very fun scenario. So I hope that it gets a more satisfying kind of review than that.
Yep.
And then it's where we get introduced to some new traps. Pitfall is a way for the exploration deck to gain more treacheries than it started with. If you fail, you get a choice between damage or to shuffle it into the exploration deck, and you don't get to discuss it with your team because it's peril. I think that this is a cool little twist on the exploration deck, but it plays on kind of the least fun part of the exploration deck.
I love this one. I really like the idea that you either screw someone else or you take a bunch of damage yourself. It's very roguish.
That is true. It's like it's a good use of peril, because you can't just stop and say like, well, how much more do we want to explore, or like have that conversation. But yeah, you're a bigger fan of the treacheries in the exploration deck than I am, so I guess that's the difference. How many? There's actually a lot of new cards on here. Oh god. Okay, yeah, we got to talk about poisonous spores. Man, this one actually, I think I like this one. This one is brutal. It's kind of the new way that this scenario tries to poison you. It attaches to a location, and then everyone there is poisoned at the end of the round. It's such a setback because it forced movement from this, like it doesn't force you to move, but it makes you heavily incentivized to move, means returning to enemies that you thought you evaded and left behind a lot of the time. So it compounds, but I don't know. How do you like poisonous spores?
It's fun. I think that it fits with the kind of pulpy adventure theme that traps go off and you have to leave the location. So
yeah, I actually like this design. It's something I think that attachments to locations so often just limit what you can do there. Like you can't explore. That's another one actually, or can't investigate. I like the ones that give you kind of tough decisions about whether to stay there or what to do while you're there. And this is like, I actually like this card. It's just one of the many reasons that the scenario is so brutal. But yeah, actually, I think that this is a really cool design. And the Apex Strangleweed. This is like the main reason to have a pocket knife, which is very weird. Because it's only for attacks of opportunity against you. And then, yeah, just this 3/6/3 enemy with alert and retaliate. It's, I think, one of the worst non-boss enemies in the game.
And yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the conglomeration of spheres in Dunwich, and I'm not a big fan of this one. I just think that there's more interesting things to be doing than stuck doing 6 damage to an enemy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you practically have to empty an entire gun into it to kill it, and then it has retaliate if you don't. Yeah, and then I find the pocket knife thing kind of baffling. Like, attacks of opportunity don't happen all that often. The pocket knife does not prevent the alert and retaliate attacks.
Yeah, it would make a lot more sense if it did something to the alert or retaliate, or let you do more damage to it or something, because it's not a hunter, so you're probably just going to try to, if you're not going to kill it, you're just going to try to evade it until you can do something. You're not going to take an attack of opportunity.
Yeah, basically. Okay. Part B. Oh man, I didn't even write the name of it. What's the Mouth of Kinyan? I think is the name of Part B.
Sounds right.
So we haven't talked yet. What do you think of the 2-part scenario? Right, like that's kind of the only the unique thing about this. I said every scenario tends to have a hook. That's the hook.
It was super interesting and exciting when I heard about it. But yeah, it ends up being 2 fairly generic scenarios, one of which is not fun.
Right.
Which is I would rather that they had just skipped Part A and made Part B a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, totally. It's right. It sounded really interesting at its face, but it just turned out to be it feels like 2 pretty complete. Like, right, they're not particularly short. Maybe the Mouth of Kinyan is a little shorter. But yeah, it just feels like 2 kind of mundane, not that fun scenarios. In my notes, on Part B, I said even more unsurprising than Part A. Like, it just uses locations you've seen before, uses treacheries you've seen before. The Harbinger is back. It's just I don't know. I have very little to say about it. I had no cards to discuss here because there's nothing new to the scenario that's interesting.
I mean, I think it's a lot better than the previous 2 scenarios. For me, this is just kind of mediocre, but it's where the campaign starts to pick up again. I don't actively dislike it the way I did Heart of the Elder's A and Boundary Beyond, but yeah, definitely pretty uninteresting.
Yeah, and it makes me the 2 scenario thing. I don't know if this is why there's a double scenario, but it makes me wonder if this is kind of just pointing to the limitations of the LCG model. I've always said, I think that this game would be way better if it wasn't tied to the I mean, it cannot be true that every story is best told in 8 parts, right? The fact that the business model has this really rigid structure, and I think that this was we see it more in Dream Eaters, but this is the first time that Matt has kind of tried to be bigger than the business model lets him be, and so I don't know if that's why this is 2 scenarios. It was just 2 story beats that they felt needed to be there, but it just leads to neither one having any new cards, and they're just not that interesting, and yeah, it just doesn't work.
Although so there are actually campaigns that are standalone, so 1 scenario, 2, which is Guardians of the Abyss, 3 for Night of the Zealot, 4 for both of the Dream Eaters, and then you've got 8 for most of the campaigns, and you've got potentially 9 or 10 for Forgotten Age. So we actually have gotten most of the different lengths.
Yeah, but
it's always.
I guess what I'm saying here is that we got a different length, but at what cost? At the cost of these 2 scenarios being really underwhelming and almost a chore. So yeah, I have long wished that both. I think that the monthly release structure is not the best way this game could be presented, and the rigid cycle structure is. I wish the game would get away from it. I get why it's there. I get that they have the production all figured out for for the cycles of packs and everything. But man, it's depressing. At the end of Part B, Alejandro shows up again. He might have already been with you. He might have you might have lost him in Threads of Fate. But either way, the same thing basically happens. It does. I mostly bring it up because it has another piece of writing that I love. What he says. So yeah. He betrays you. Surprise. Spoiler. What he says is, or what the line at the end of pretty much any resolution you get is, "Take their minds," Alejandro commands the creatures. "We have no further use for them. It is your last human memory." And like the scenario ends there. When it was packaged, like if you've read previews, you know the gist of what City of Archives is, but it actually like ends on a cliffhanger. That cliffhanger of "It is your last human mystery," or excuse me, "It is your last human memory." I think that's super cool. That's super well written. So
totally.
I take it back. Boundary Beyond, or I can't get the name. I can't get the name of the scenarios right here. Heart of the Eldest is great actually because of that line. Okay, I promise I wouldn't forget to plug it because I'm sure people are popping in and out of the chat. Fill out I'm linking it in the chat again. Submit cards for our decks tomorrow. We are streaming the Murder at the Excelsior Hotel, and you all get to build our decks for us one card at a time by submitting your cards, and we're going to shuffle up your submissions and play with them. So please do. The link's in the chat. How are we doing? We've been streaming for an hour and a half. Do you need a break or anything? I actually had a beer on ice that I'm going to open.
Ah, nice.
But
I brought whiskey with me to refill, but I don't know that I should. I might get a little too tired.
That's fair. It is. I'm in my game room with obviously the air conditioning off, or else you would be listening to the air conditioning on stream. So it's getting a little warm in here, but I'm glad I brought ice cold drinks.
Oh, and this shirt, by the way, is from the Game of Thrones Championship for the last World Championship at Fantasy Flight. So that's kind of my Fantasy Flight call out today. It's House Botley from Game of Thrones. They have a fish logo. So
House Botley, famous Game of Thrones house.
It's kind of a meme with the Game of Thrones card game community that they're just a very silly house that people like to talk about. Not well known outside of that.
I am not sure why this chat is slow to come through. I see Thoth on the monthly release structure saying it matches up with your ability to get together with your partner, with your friends. Oh, now they're coming through. Here we go. To get together when that was a thing we could do, to play a couple scenarios every month and a half or so. Like, I guess kind of my counter to that is if it came out on a different cadence, you could still do that, right? Like you don't have to, it could come out in a big box every 6 months, and you could still play one every month. Nothing would stop you.
Who has self-control though? Like this show just dropped on Netflix and I'm gonna watch an episode once a week. Like no one.
But I guess that's to me what the argument in favor of the monthly release boils down to, is just like, I have no self-control, so I need FFG to self-control.
No one has self-control. Nobody.
So that's what that's what I don't know. My biggest complaint, and I'm rehashing something I've said on Discord a lot, is that I start a campaign with my friends in like March, and it's not going to finish until November of that year, right? Like it's going to end. People can move, people can switch jobs and not have time to play anymore. Like the amount of times that something changes and campaigns die off in that time. Not to mention that by November, I don't remember what happened in March. Like that's way slower than a TV season or something. It's so difficult to remember and to just track the story. Like I really never, like I didn't understand the Forgotten Age story until I was able to just look at it all or play it all in much shorter succession. I don't know. I'm not a fan at all.
I do appreciate the story more on the second playthrough. And also Psychopath, I'm drinking Rittenhouse rye whiskey. That's
a good choice. Okay, City of Archives. So this is completely out of left field in this campaign, right? Like the time. So Yithians are creatures that I don't think they time travel per se, but they have the ability to project their consciousness through time.
Yeah, they have a weird
creatures.
Yeah, they have a weird method of time travel where they just like switch bodies with people in different times.
Yeah, so it was kind of a hint that they might be involved, or that they might come into play when the time theme kind of started emerging a little ways in the campaign. But for the most part, like Alejandro is actually possessed by a Yithian, and they're taking your consciousness back to their city and putting it into Yithian bodies and then holding you and interrogating you. Not the direction I thought the Forgotten Age was going. And I'm just going to put it on screen so we can talk about it right now. This is your investigator now. You're in the body of the Yithian. What were your thoughts going into this for the first time?
So my first reaction is like, oh, that's awesome that they provide like new investigators for you. My second reaction is this scenario is not always very fun to play because like you've built your deck to do like a specific thing. Maybe it's like, I'm going to build my will up a bunch and then I'm going to put out awesome spells. And then they just like completely replace your character card. And now this deck that you built to do one thing like doesn't work at all. And in addition, there's like some other rules in terms of like you take out unique assets. And I think you can't play any assets at first or something.
That's
so there's
right. You're like bound up in captivity. Yeah.
So there's like a good chance that like whatever your deck is built to do is just like kind of worthless in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be pretty frustrating. Like there's a lot of cool stuff about this scenario. I mean, I think a lot of the characters that you encounter are really cool. A lot of the tasks that you do are really cool. But it's not always fun to just be like, oh, this deck that I built to do something for the previous 5 scenarios just like doesn't do that thing anymore.
Yeah. And I'm seeing in the chat, and we can pull some of these up at the next break between scenarios, but the chat's pretty negative on this too, which surprises me. I actually like this scenario a lot. But I tend to, I guess kind of like Boundary Beyond also, I like novelty a lot. So the fact that this is just completely different from anything else that the game does ever, and the way Boundary Beyond just worked very differently from the way Explore or pretty much any other scenario has worked. Like that probably explains why I have a contrary opinion about some of these from a lot of people. But yeah, I think that this is just so unusual and so weird that I don't hate it. No,
like
and I don't like. I don't like the chat really does.
I don't hate it either because like I see all the good points, but you know, when you're sitting there and you're like, I've got my shriveling and my rite of seeking and my will is 2, and like, what do I do with this? I hope someone else has a plan because I don't. Like, it's not. Yeah. It's just not always fun.
Yeah, it's true, and it's really. I do kind of wish it was a little better. Right, like just like looking at the card itself, it has 2 across all of its stats. Just for fun, your allies are still with you, but they are also in Yithian bodies. Mm-hmm. And then after you commit a card to a skill test you're performing, you double the skill icons on that card. Limit once per test. And the Elder Sign is +2, draw 1 card. Like, I like that this is designed in a way that like everyone has icons in their deck. So like no matter what your deck is, like at least you can use the text on this card. It's like it's probably a better fit as a neutral investigator than Lola. But the it does feel weak. Like if the stats were 3s across the board, I think it would just feel more fun because then it would feel like, oh, all of a sudden my overpower skill card gets me to 7 combat, and I guess it still gets you to 6, which is a lot. But like, I wish that it lets you feel empowered in a way, even though you're clearly not going to be functioning in the way your deck kind of was designed to, and not as well as usual. I feel like you could feel powerful, and you just don't because you're staring at these low stats.
Yeah, well. I think the idea was that like, oh, fighters should probably have fist icons and mystics probably have will icons and rogues probably have evade icons. So they're still going to be able to kind of do their thing by doubling them. But part of the problem is that by the 6th scenario, you've often like cut those basic skill cards. Yeah. Where it's like you might have started with Guts in your deck as a mystic, but you cut it for a tarot card, which has 0 skill icons, you know? Mm-hmm. So in reality, you might not have any double icons, and like just doubling your single icon gets you to like 4 of your main stat.
Sure. Yeah.
Doesn't feel great.
Yeah. Although in a way, this is like yet another way that the campaign rewards the replay, right? Like supplies, like you can, when you know this is coming, you can make your deck building, just your upgrading decisions accordingly. And I think that forcing you to, or encouraging you to reconsider getting rid of those basic skill cards, like, is a good thing. I think that's one of the benefits of card games, is that the context, Hearthstone has cards in its like core set that are bad, that no one ever plays, and then a new expansion comes out and there's this combo with one of them that all of a sudden it's great, and it's like, I think that's a good thing. I think card games should do that. So I like that this all of a sudden makes cards valued in a different way. I do think it's totally unfair when it comes out of the blue in the blind play.
Yeah, I remember like playing this with a Mateo that relied on Hubert's Key as a mystic to add will, and like that gets removed from the game completely because it's a unique item. That I feel like I accomplished absolutely nothing in that playthrough. And it's like a 4 or 5 hour scenario. Like it's one of the longer ones. So like sitting there for 4 hours while like my other players did stuff, but I was just kind of useless. Is not the best.
That is no, I completely lost that train of thought. Yay, live recordings.
Oh yeah. So someone suggested, should they have given you like cards in deck to build these Yithians rather than taking your deck? I might have preferred that, because instead of like taking this carefully constructed thing and like wrecking it so it doesn't work, if they had just given us cards, even if they were underpowered, it wouldn't feel like a carefully tuned machine where you like removed a part and now it doesn't function. Instead, it's just like a lower powered machine.
Well, and that, I mean, you wouldn't have to give us a new deck or a new like hand, like the prologue to Circle Undone. It could just be that it has 3 signature cards, right? That give you like 3 good power boosts or good assets that go with it or something. I actually think that's a great point. It would be really nice if you got a little more than just this weaker investigator card. I had actually been thinking that it was a no-brainer that the return box would have kind of like Undimensioned and Unseen took the 5 identical broods and made them different. I was thinking until this moment that the return box would take the 4 identical Yithian bodies and give you 4 different ones, which still might happen, but also just giving you the Yithian signature cards would be another cool thing the return box could do. Especially
if you got to choose, so that like there was one that helped Mystics, there was one that helped Rogues, there was one that helped Survivors, right. It can maybe help your deck function a little better.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see what they do with that, because I think that is something, like, if I were to place money on the return box doing one thing, it would be adding a new wrinkle or variety to these Yithian bodies. Because I think, and judging by the chat, it seems like everyone's had enough of them, So I think I'm honestly surprised at kind of the general negativity in the chat. Although there are some defenders, this is the most that the chat has been going, and we won't be able to quote everyone, but just strong reactions that don't match mine. I'm kind of surprised. The scenario itself is kind of a little bit of an aimless wander, right? Like, you're exploring the city. You end up adding, like, you're not exploring, but the locations don't all start in play. I'm blanking on what even adds them to play. Is it just advancing the act with clues? Like the library and the other
sounds
buildings. Right. Yeah. That's probably it. Oh, good. Scott is here with his all caps to say, "I love Corey of Archives." That's
do you know a nerd named Corey that you call that?
City of Archives. Lots of good intentional and unintentional nicknames. So I mean, the scenario is a twist on the Asylum from Carcosa. I'm blanking on the name. The Unspeakable Oath, I think. Where it is, at least down at the last part of the scenario, it's a checklist of objectives, right? That you want to do more of. And I think you even maybe get exposed to them, similar to the Asylum. You get exposed to them before you get an objective to actually complete them. But at that point, you've been to the Asylum, so you kind of get what's going on. But what I like is the way it handles the degrees of success, where it's not just you need 4 out of 6 of them. It tells you multiple times, like, you want as many as possible. There are serious repercussions if you don't get enough. I like that. I like that twist on the checklist style of objective.
Totally, yeah. The randomness is pretty fun, and I think your first time you became a Yithian permanently, right?
Yeah, so and this is something that the chat has been debating as well. I've seen it is possible if you don't get enough objectives to be killed or to be driven insane, but B, to be stuck in your body of the Yithian and have it come with you back to back to Earth, where or back to present day Earth. I lose track a little bit about where the City of Archives is located, but it's your body of Yithian comes with you. I think in that campaign, I was playing Calvin. That was our blind play campaign. I became a Yithian, but my 5 of each kind of trauma carried over. A Yithian body that starts with 2 health and 2 horror is not very good. So I don't remember whether I retired it immediately or just did it for the 8th scenario, but I recall just retiring the character and creating a level 0. I think I created a level 0 Roland deck to finish out the campaign. But I wasn't mad. Even though I retired the character, it was just kind of an interesting, instead of killing me, it gave me the choice, which it was an interesting choice and something that I debated for the entire month until the next time we played.
Calvins never make it all the way through a campaign anyway.
No, they don't.
You would have just died the next scenario.
That's totally true. So a few kind of the ending of the scenario, it's not just the checklist, but it has that kind of climactic moment where you need to fill your hand up to 10 cards. This scenario kind of does a cool thing, I think, where your deck represents kind of your connection to your humanity, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple treacheries, and we'll look at them that remove your deck from the game. And that, it represents you losing hold on your memories and your humanity. And then to be able to return to your body, you have to kind of gather up that willpower as represented by getting 10 cards in your hand. I think that totally succeeded for me. I think that was a great example of evoking the theme through the mechanics that I really liked.
Yeah, I agree. It's great thematically. The one complaint I have is that the effect that removes cards from your deck permanently, if you do end up with 8 cards and one of them's a weakness and you draw it 3 or 4 times, which also happened to me in my Mateo playthrough,
right.
That is pretty frustrating. But thematically, I totally agree. And I think most of the time that doesn't happen, but there is a random chance that you can end up with a very small deck, including weaknesses. So,
well, you can't end up, and this is a good segue, you can't end up with that small a deck because Lost Humanity, which says test willpower 5 for each point you fail by, remove the top card of your deck from the game. It goes on to say if there are fewer than 10 total cards in your hand, deck, and discard pile, you're driven insane. So it doesn't actually, it's not obvious when you first see this, but this is actually just kind of a mercy rule because in order to escape, you need to get 10 cards in your hand. So this is it's literally impossible for you to finish this scenario. You might as well stop playing it.
Yeah.
But this is and with the title and the flavor text about the eradication of your memories and losing humanity, this card is really key to kind of driving home that flavor of what your deck and hand represent in your Yithian body. I think it's super cool.
Yep. It's great art too.
It is. The art in this whole, I have a couple more examples. The art in this whole scenario is really good, really detailed. The Yithian bodies are just weird. I actually put this one on here purely because I love the flavor, or I love the art and the idea that. So, and I know that Thoth has been sharing some info about the Yithians in the chat. I'll pull up, but the Yithians are sentient. They're scientists. So this would normally be this vicious monstrosity that is attacking you with all these tentacles and claws and things. But this is actually a scholar in their society, and you can parlay with it despite this horrifying. This horrifying image. So it's a really cool, I think the Yithians are just a really cool conflict of they take that monstrous Lovecraftian tentacled horror but they're actually kind of mostly calm, civilized creatures,
Yeah.
Captive Mind, more great art. And then I wanted to highlight this card because it's a really, it's almost something that I'm surprised we haven't seen much more of, but testing a 0 difficulty test, but then your test result is how many cards you get to keep in your hand is a pretty cool twist on a skill test. I like it. I'm surprised that this was basically a one-off, because it seems like a really cool and kind of like no-brainer way to use the skill test system. Oh yeah, and then one of the other consequences you can get for not doing perfectly on the scenario is this out-of-body experience weakness. I think this weakness is super fun. It shuffles each card from your hand into your deck, so it ruins your game plan, and it may make you more likely to draw other weaknesses. But it's not like inherently that painful. Yeah. I don't know. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so eventually you hopefully make it out. This is, I think, the first point where you can lose the campaign, and I think it's the earliest one that's been in the game to date, right? It's the first time that an early loss is in the 6th scenario.
Maybe. Yeah.
Take a sip while you think about it. Let's see. I know, wow, you have chatted a lot during this. I saw.
We're talking about the pendant. They love it.
The pendant. That's right. Yes. This brings in the useless pendant, aids you with your connection to your humanity. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thoth explained that the Yithians are long dead future historians, so they actually exist only in the past. They're dead. And they're projecting their consciousnesses forward through time to explore other timelines and conduct their experiments and advance their collections. Yeah, I think they're super cool. They're probably some of my favorite like Lovecraft creations. All right, I apologize. Chat has moved fast. I'm glad you are all chatting, but I cannot read it fast enough to feature much more. All right, Depths of Yoth. Can we all agree this is a good scenario?
Yeah, this is almost up there with Threads of Fate for me. I really like this one.
Me too. I don't know if I would put it at Threads of Fate level, but yeah. So this is where now Alejandro betrayed us last scenario. Now Ichtaka betrays us. Right. This is where we find out that she is a cultist, a member of. Yeah. What is she?
Snakes.
I know, of like Yigs, of the Volusian people, the snake people, but like, so I was surprised when looking back at this, the story of this campaign. I was surprised that Ichtaka was not the Harbinger. I was kind of, when I got here, I was like, oh wait, have we never seen Ichtaka and the Harbinger at the same time? Like, is it actually her? Thinking harder about it, I was like, oh, that doesn't actually work, because you can kill the Harbinger and Ichtaka would not.
And you have Ichtaka in your deck,
right?
Unless it was like a time travel thing, or like
she kind of comes and goes from your deck, but yeah, so it probably doesn't work. But I actually kind of wonder if the Harbinger was originally concepted to be Ichtaka's other form. It would kind of make that element of the campaign that doesn't really kind of have a fit in the jigsaw puzzle that well, like make more sense. But anyway, she isn't the Harbinger. She's just another snake woman. But yeah, so she exposes herself. You end up fleeing from Yig and the snake people through multiple levels of down of the steps to Yoth. Yeah, this is kind of this is like Heart of the Elders. It's like Groundhog's Day, the scenario, but it's actually in a good way. Right?
So, yeah, it's weird that it's like repetitive, and you keep you'll end up repeating some of the same locations, but somehow it's like not annoying. I think you're drawing like 5 scenarios each time out of a potential 10, and you have to do it at least 3 or 4 times to win. I think is it 3 times if you have the rope?
Yeah, the rope gives you like an extra point of progress on your depths. And I mean, like have to win. Like the scenario does end if you get to 5, but it has degrees of success also, depending on how you do. So what is win? But yeah, it's like every few rounds you end up making it through the cave, solving the explore puzzle, getting to the steps, and then you wipe it all, reset the explore deck with actually new locations. You use like 5 out of possible 9 location, so it's different each time, and go again. And it's like, it's quick, so you get through it multiple times. It has really smart mechanics, and we'll look at some of the cards where the skull tokens get harder the deeper you go, but also so do some of the treacheries themselves. And it also has this pursuit mechanic where so if you've played Battlestar Galactica, the board game, right? Where this with the Cylon fleets, where every time the ship jumps, the Cylons don't die; they just get set aside and come back later. The snakes do the same thing, right? Each time the agenda advances, I think snakes get pulled back into pursuit. So you can try to leave them behind and buy some time, but you ultimately need to defeat them,
or at least keep running.
Yeah, or keep running, right? Yeah, I think it's super successful. I love it. It's also it's the punchline for the Yig's Fury, right? There's 7 agendas, and depending on how much fury you've accumulated via those vengeance points, you start on anywhere from agenda 1 to agenda 6, I think, or maybe even agenda 7. I jotted down that there is a 19 doom difference between no vengeance and like the max vengeance. So it is extremely impactful here, actually. It's I think it's really well done. A
couple other things I like about the agendas: they have great, like, really creepy, like, intimidating flavor text on the agendas.
Yes, they do.
Snakes. Mm-hmm. And then I think you don't lose if you get through all of them, right? It just gets incredibly hard.
The 7th agenda does not end the game. It doesn't even advance ever, I don't think. Or maybe it advances when everyone's defeated. But instead, for each doom in play, everyone draws an extra encounter card. So you get 1 encounter card each, and then the next round 2 encounter cards each, and then 3, and so on. And that is part of what makes this so fun to play standalone and see just how deep you can get, because it doesn't force you to stop 5 levels down. And also the agenda never has a hard stop. So you just, like, maybe you make it to level 10, you're up to drawing 5 encounter cards every round, but you somehow have gotten to a point where you can pass those tests and kill those enemies and keep going. It's super fun.
Wait, what was I going to say? I really like the fail mechanic as well. So you're going down, and the failure is that you get surrounded by snakes and you have to jump down. Yes. So the closer you are to the ground, the less damage you take. If you jump from the top, you take a ton of trauma. Which totally makes, like, flavor sense, and it's pretty funny.
Yeah, you can take physical trauma. You can get an injury weakness if you jump from too high. And that actually, if you only make it to level 2, you take 2 trauma and an injury weakness, and you are obviously defeated. So there was a 3rd trauma. It's rough if you don't do well on here. Luckily, it's actually not that hard a scenario. Maybe if you have 15 vengeance, making it so you have almost no time, that's when you'll really struggle to get deep. But I think it's actually a pretty fair scenario.
Yeah, I've failed it, but I've never, like, failed it from the first level or anything like that.
Right. Which that kills you outright if you do that. So that also ends the scenario, or ends the campaign. I think you can lose the campaign in 2 places here. And we can just bring him up. The other noteworthy thing about this scenario is it's scenario 7, but it's where we meet the Ancient One for the campaign. Right, Yig is here, and then it's scenario 8. Kind of, Yig has been either killed or escaped, and you don't have to address him in the 8th scenario. So it's a very different use of the Ancient One than any other campaign, even after Forgotten Age. So I think that's pretty cool. I don't actually think that Yig is all that noteworthy himself. Like, he's massive, he does a lot of damage, has a lot of health. Nothing too fancy. He has great art. But yeah, it's the fact that you meet him now and not later that I think is super unique.
Yeah, I think it's a fun little twist that you've got this, like, weird, cool looking bad guy, but he's not really that important to the story. Like, they actually keep Iktak and Alejandro being more important to the story, even though they're not quite as intimidating as fighters. Yeah,
it's almost like they set out to tell a story without an Ancient One, and they're like, well, we'll put it in one, but it won't be what the story's about, per se.
Yeah, totally.
And I like that. I think that's very cool. I doubt that that's what the Innsmouth conspiracy will be like either. I bet that's going to be Cthulhu. So probably the last one of these we're getting for a while. But I think it's very cool to tell a little bit more nuanced story than just puppeteer in the background is pulling the strings, and you eventually figure it out and go into a portal and kill it. So yeah, very cool. And bathophobia I put on here, because bathophobia is a cool word that I learned because of this scenario. It means fear of depths. So good. And this is just an example where it's a treachery that is very easy when you're at depth number 1, but a lot less easy when you're at depth number 7, because the test just scales with the depth that you're at. Plus the tokens in the bag are scaling with the depth. So it's a double whammy. Very cool design. I think that was all. Yeah, that was all that I queued up. It's a lot of snakes, really, this deck. The chat talks a lot more when they are disagreeing with me. Not a lot to highlight about this scenario. It seems like pretty universal love for it.
What do you think about Alejandro? So by this point, you can have made peace with both Iktaka and Alejandro, but they're a little bit different. So Iktaka, if you befriend her, is still a snake person, but she realizes that humans are pretty cool. Whereas Alejandro, you actually befriend him by kicking the person that you thought was Alejandro out of his body and restoring the real Alejandro in the City of Archives. You find the real Alejandro and you are able to give him his body back. What do you think of that kind of like difference? Like one of them, you're actually befriending a snake person. The other one, you're not actually befriending a real Yithian. You're replacing what had been a Yithian with a human again.
Right. Yeah, I think that's super cool, and it just adds more nuance to the story, that these characters mirror each other in a lot of ways, but still have actually, if you're reading and enjoying the flavor text, very different character arcs that I think are super cool. I do kind of a criticism of the Ichtaka side is that whether she befriends you or not doesn't really change anything. At least not about, like, it happens kind of in the lead into this scenario, and then I like triple check. There is nothing different in the setup or the way this plays out based on whether she's your friend or your foe.
Yeah, she'll be in your deck, but it's not like she helps you. She doesn't tell Yig not to kill you or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like purely flavor text. It routes you through different flavor text, like either that says like, oh, I've had a change of heart. I'm sorry for leading you here. Versus like, haha, you fall into my clutches. Like, it's two very different tones, but that's all it is a tone. So
I mean,
it's cool, but it doesn't come through.
Is that something that if in Return to, do you think that they should make it so that she actually convinces Yig not to eat you, but like maybe a Yithian assassin force arrives to attack you instead, so it's not just a cakewalk?
I'm trying to remember whether you even put anything in the campaign log. Is there anything even for Return to like use to do something different?
I think you write something down about like you've restored her faith in humanity or something.
Oh yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it would probably be several cards, but if they like pretty much replaced all the best snake cards with like Yithian cards or something, if you had it on your side, that would be a pretty cool twist for Return.
Yeah, I'd agree. This is another kind of like we were talking about with why were we comparing this to Peter Clover before? This has been a long video and I'm starting to lose track. But
I think because like it's difficult to get them on your side on your first
play. I just mean like it's another example of it has the potential to add a little bit more meaning or a little bit more reward to doing this kind of what used to be like almost a purely story thing. So yeah, here's hoping. I don't particularly want Return to mess with this scenario too much. I think it's about as close to perfect as a scenario can be.
But it would be like cool if you just think of it as a total alternative scenario where you've got like crazy like Yithian possessed people chasing you through this cave.
That's true.
It would be a secondary. Like you could have now.
You could play either one. Yeah. That's true. I got to remember that like returns changes are not mandatory. They do not take away from the existence of the
it would only be or if you had maxed out the Iktaka path.
Right. All right. Final scenario, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Final scenario. Shattered Aeon.
Well,
they won't let us go home without one more supply check. Just to note that it's like the 5th time. If you have the torches, you light braziers on the way down into the Nexus of Nikai, which seems like a good thing, but then the setup for the scenario just punishes you if you didn't do it. So, one last punch in the gut from the supply mechanic. And then we get this cool scenario where it's the exploring's a little different. It's got kind of a wheel and spokes where you're at these like central locations and exploring. First, you're exploring like other worlds, I think, right? And then you're exploring different the shattered locations, the different periods in time. Ultimately, trying to kind of one by one, you actually like pick up the attachment, or you pick up the locations and attach them to the Relic of Ages, right? As you like mend those tears. It's a pretty cool scenario. Like, it's not maybe my favorite final scenario, but it's pretty unique.
Yeah. So a couple of weird, interesting things that it does, because obviously there's lots of extra dimensional final scenarios. Like, that part's not new. But the fact that Iktaka and Alejandro are potentially both there, and they've been these like story characters, but they weren't portrayed as like ancient ones. And they're both pretty hard. And if you haven't befriended either of them, they'll both be enemies. And then that's really hard. You now have to be very, very well tuned in terms of your decks to be able to deal with both of them as an enemy. I think if you're going through as your blind playthrough and you just haven't befriended any of them, not because you were trying to forge your own path, but just because you were stumbling through the campaign, you're probably going to have to side with one of them to actually win this.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, I have them ready to pull up here. Like, here is Ichtaka in all her glory, Scion of Yig. Yeah, so it's funny. So the way to like get the quote unquote best ending, the way to actually save the world and yourselves, is to complete the act deck by collecting a bunch of locations on the relic, representing you having mended all these tears in time. But each of these, we've got Ichtaka and Alejandro, are really difficult enemies that have this parlay that on the back, if you get to flip them over, give you an opportunity to plead for mercy and join their side, which is a very sacrificing Lita to Umurdoth type option, right? It's
not quite, because it doesn't instantly win it for you. It replaces the victory condition with something that's a little bit easier, but it's not like sacrificing Lita just instantly you win, but you don't feel great about it. In this case, you actually do get a new objective that you have to do. So it feels a little bit more like winning, but it's not the optimal win for most people, probably.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I think I like it, that I think backs up my comparison to Lita, right? Like, that's not the optimal win for most people. That's you having made like a horrible sacrifice in order to scrape by. But the story is that you get trapped in Volusia or in the City of Archives, which, is kind of cool, but not what you set out to do.
I think what I would love it if they did in return, but I'm not really expecting them to, because they generally don't introduce too much extra story, is so you're only able to side with the snakes or the Yithians if you actually didn't befriend Alejandro or Iktaka, which does make it sort of like a suboptimal ending in terms of like, I'm enemies with the Yithians, but I'm kind of going to make a truce with them. I want to see the opposite, where like I've actually befriended Iktaka and I befriended Alejandro, and I'm good with them. Like, we're going to have a big, happy human Yithian or human snake future. So I would love it if they introduced a positive Yithian and a positive snake ending, where it really is like, I wasn't just out of desperation siding with you.
Where like the Volusians and humanity live together in harmony.
Exactly.
Yeah. After.
If you maxed out Iktaka, you're like, hey, why can't we strike a deal? Why can't we all be friends? And like, that's the ending. That would be super cool to me.
Yeah, it actually it's funny. So I actually haven't. I think I've played Shattered Aeons once in our blind play because we got there. I played Forgotten Age also in the Iron Man Last Arkham Knights, where you play a whole campaign in one day. But we ran out of time after after Depths of Yoth, and I've had other campaigns either just like not finish, be abandoned, or lose. And so, yeah, I've only played it the once. And until sitting down last night to kind of refresh myself, I thought that's what the endings were, right? Like that's how I remembered them. So I was surprised that it's actually like, oh, this is you making a compromise and just barely making it out alive, not like actually really coming around on those Yithians.
Yeah, I mean, I thought at first it was like a mistake that if you like befriended Iktaka, you couldn't side with the snakes, because like that seems like a weird thing. Like, shouldn't befriending the snake person make it easier to side with the snakes? But it is, yeah. It's like, oh, we're enemies, but I'm going to make a truce with you. It's a little weird story-wise, right, that there's not a more purposeful alliance that you can propose.
Yeah, it's definitely counterintuitive that, like, say you set out at the beginning of the campaign and you say, like, I've never had the Volusia ending before. That's what I want to try to do. That the actual way to do that is to make it Shaka turn against you, yeah, right? Because that's how she shows up, so that you can plead for mercy. Yeah, it was definitely not what I thought it was when I took another look, and that's why I compare it more to Lita, because it's actually not designed to be kind of an option or like a happy story ending. It's designed to be a subpar compromise ending, like Lita is. So yeah, it's interesting. I like it though. I like the scenario. I hope to play it again someday.
Yeah, there's some pretty memorable locations. Like I think you can visit Atlantis is one that I remember, and it's like slowly sinking as you're there. I think it's represented by adding Doom to it. So like as it gets more Doom, I think eventually it gets removed from the game if it gets too much. So it was a pretty thematic like evocation of Atlantis. Mm-hmm. And then I think there was
that's right. I was gonna say one thing that is cool is you explore all these different places the game might go someday more fully.
Yeah, and I was thought Fish brought this up. I love it too. There's like Ruins of New York that has a couple of I think night gaunts hanging out there, or some kind of monster.
Yeah,
it's like a really memorable one.
Yeah, that's super cool. And then you go to the Plateau of Lang, which in the Dream Eaters campaign you actually we go to as part of the campaign, and then the shores of. Oh man, my favorite way to say it is Rilia, the Cthulhu domain, right? I think no one knows how to pronounce that. But I actually, considering how far in advance these campaigns are designed, I think that those were put in here like with full intent of those being kind of a foreshadowing of future places the game would go. Looking at the other locations, I don't know that there's anywhere else. Like, I'd be surprised if we actually get an Atlantis campaign, but I really liked this little opportunity to check out all these other places that and different time periods, because you got stuff like I just looked at the chat. You've got stuff like the future of New York. That's actually some of my favorite. It reminds me of Eldritch Horror. That's one of the places that Gates can go to, is like this bleak future of destroyed New York. I would actually be all for a campaign there, but probably there's not going to be a whole campaign in future New York. But it was a very cool way to get a taste of those into Arkham Horror, the card game.
Totally.
Oh wait, a couple other things to look at as far as just kind of looking at the scenario. So help me with this. The Nexus of Nakai is like where timelines all intersect. So why is there stuff like the Formless Spawn here? I don't understand what these creatures are or why they're here.
Sometimes when timelines are intersecting, there's just like some goo, appears. Like,
this is actually kind of an interesting little mechanic, because when it spawns, it's almost like part of the location, right? It sits on it cannot move or be moved. It sits on the central location. That's the wheel that the spokes are out from, and becomes an obstacle every time you have to pass back through it. Or you can sink 10 damage into it to kill it. I actually think that this is a pretty cool thing, but I have no idea why it's here.
Yeah, I guess they probably wanted something neutral that didn't represent either snakes or Yithians, is maybe the only reason I can think of for why, they did it that way.
What I do get is the Temporal Devourer. Have you seen the movie or read the Stephen King book Langoliers?
Not at all.
Oh, it's about people who get like kind of stuck in a time loop or go back in time. But the thing about going back in time is that you can't go back that far in the past because these horrible flying monsters just like start eating it all. They eat the past. So that's what the Temporal Devourer reminds me of. I don't. I'll have to ask Matt someday if it's actually a Stephen King reference, but I like it. I like it as a Stephen King reference.
Yep.
All right, so that's it. That's the campaign. We did it.
Well. So if you've been forging your own path, so you're not siding with either Alejandro or Ixtaka, there is an ending here where you get like a super version of the Relic of Ages. And you can now actually decide. The best thing to do is to turn back time, go back to the temple, and never actually take the Relic of Ages in the first place.
And have you done this? Have you played the scenario?
Yeah,
I never have.
My last playthrough, this is the ending that we were going for. We were sort of knew all the past and all the decisions you had to make. So we went for this ending. So it reuses all the locations from the second scenario, Doom of Vesely. It only has 4 new cards, which is a scenario card, which has a pretty hard Elder thing with it's either -4 or -6 and places the Doom if you fail. As well as skulls, which I think are not that. It's like -1 per Doom per location with Doom on it. So, and then 3 new agendas. And it's the same locations as Doom of Vesely, but one of those agendas spawns Yig, so he does appear again.
Okay. So he actually is in the finale of sorts.
Yeah. So he follows you to the temple because I guess he realizes something weird's going on here, and he wants to prevent it. Supposedly, you are also required to sing Cher's Turn Back Time.
I was just going to pull that up. I appreciate that comment. Yes, you must sing Cher's Turn Back Time in order to access the secret scenario. Yeah, I aspire to play it someday. I never have, but I super love that there's a quote unquote secret scenario. I almost wish that there was a way that it could be a better kept secret. Like it was like on the back of the campaign insert in the Mythos pack. It was kind of hard to miss.
Yeah.
It would be very cool if there was some way to keep it from being spoiled a little more. I don't know what that would be.
Yeah, I mean, with the way like printing technology is, like they probably would have to like do 2 less cards to do this, but it would have been nice if there was like a blank card before and above the turn back time cards.
Sure. Yeah. Or if these were instead of being an LCG, if they were packaged in boxes as an entire campaign, it could be under the box insert or something.
Oh yeah.
Take a page out of the book of every Legacy game.
And I mean, I suspect at some point before Arkham ends, they're going to do a Legacy campaign just because like Legacy is such good money and like.
Yeah, I hope so. I think that would be super cool, and I love Legacy games. So, yeah, we can dream. I know, and I've harped a lot on because I think that this campaign exemplifies it in a couple ways. I've harped a lot on the LCG model, but I also love that Fantasy Flight and Matt Newman and the other developers of the game are pushing the boundaries on it where they can. Dream Eaters has 2 shorter campaigns, although then you have 2 months in between continuing any given campaign. We're getting those investigator starter decks that are a completely different type of product. Like, those. I don't know if the 8-part cycles are ever going to go away, but at least they're breaking down in a way that gives me hope for more interesting products, because I think that there's lots of room in the game system for to be less limited by that.
So you've railed against the 8-part campaign, but how many scenarios are you hoping are going to be in Barkham Horror?
Oh, I'm hoping that there's like at least 3 in the Barkham box, but then it's the I don't know. I just want like a release for it every year on April Fools and have it never end. Can that happen?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. Barkham is the new normal. Yes. Here we go. Let's get to Code Games. Yeah, basically, once Barkham comes out, I'm never going to be playing Arkham Horror again. I will only be playing Barkham Horror. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you enjoy our Barkham content for years to come.
Also, shout out to Code Games for changing their avatar to a time travel game just for this video. I assume you did it just for us.
Oh, and I got rid of that from the screen right as you said that.
Yeah.
What game is that?
It's Life is Strange, which is one of those games that really uses video game mechanics to do time travel a lot better than you can necessarily do it in a card game.
Yeah, Life is Strange is on my pile of shame. I need to play that. One of those things that like I've had 4 months of quarantine. What else have I been doing? Why am I not playing Life is Strange? Okay, well, and any final thoughts on the campaign? We were pretty damn thorough, and we're at 2.5 hours. Or should we go play Life is Strange? I think overall, yeah, it's my least favorite campaign, but as you can see, it's like got high highs and low lows. It's probably my favorite campaign to play certain parts of standalone.
I really dislike Boundary Beyond in the first half of Heart of the Elders, but for me, it's still heads and shoulders above Zealot and Dunwich. I can still pretty much replay this along with all the other campaigns that are starting with Carcosa.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dunwich feels antiquated in a lot of ways, but I think I have more fun replaying that than I do playing this. I don't know.
I'm like done with Dunwich. I can't. I'm done with it.
I don't know. I just played Return to Dunwich with Kyle. We streamed it, and we played Jenny and Mateo because we needed a powerhouse team to get him his first ever win of the Return campaign, and we had a blast. Like I think it's still good. I don't know. Yeah, but it's also kind of comfort food. It's like I want to play Arkham, but I don't want it to be that hard or complicated. Like the Dunwich campaign will always be there for that. Okay. Thank you to everyone who joined us. This was we had a great turnout. I was fully expecting it to be like 5 people, but I completely enjoyed having this. Completely enjoyed interacting with you on the chat. This was a total blast. Maybe this will inspire us to do more live episodes sometime. But next on our plate is reviewing the player cards in the. Well, actually, we've got the Return to Forgotten Age box. We'll talk about the player cards on that, I'm sure, and then a million videos covering the player cards in the starter decks, right? Because it's going to be so many of them. So I don't know if we're going to be able to handle that live, but maybe we'll have to rekindle this fire someday down the road.
Yep.
All right. With that, we'll get out of here. Again, if you stumble on us during this or joined us, this is part of FarkhamCon, the online Arkham Horror LCG convention coinciding with Gen Con, because so many of us would have loved to be there playing Arkham together. So check out FarkhamCon.com, and there's lots more events all the way through Sunday, including more streams here. So, and like, subscribe. YouTube.com/optimalplay is actually our YouTube channel, which is kind of our primary product. So please join us there. And thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking the afternoon off work with me to talk about snakes.
Yep.
And we'll get out of here. Take care, everyone. Till we see you next. Be optimal.
Bye.